Begin transmission. Hello, everybody. It is Chris, aka Starrapter. I'm joined by Milton and Ben. I am back. I have survived another year at New York Comic Con 2022. A lot to get into this week, especially with New York Comic Con. We're going to be covering everything that happened with Star Wars and my fun adventures over there, as well as not one, but two episodes of Andor to break down. We have episode 5, The Axe Forgets, as well as episode 6, The Eye. So we will be covering those episodes in the back half of this here episode. So guys, it's been 2 weeks. What have you been up to?
Just living life, man. Living life, enjoying some good football, and also just some Star Wars here or there. But I'm glad that you survived Comic Con. We were able to see the pictures. Looked like you and the old lady had a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into it, but yeah, we went to a couple of fun after parties, and well, you can see our costumes. She was Wednesday and Scarlet Witch, and I was Jedi Luke as well as Cal Kestis. So had a lot of fun in that regard. But yeah, the Eagles are doing pretty well. You guys in Philly must be happy.
Yeah, we got a big one this Sunday night, so let's hope.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, you're living it good, Milton, with your Eagles. My Browns are making me sad as always. It's been a rough couple weeks, and luckily we're getting some Star Wars content at least to pass the time. Star Wars and House of the Dragon, of course, which that show, in my opinion, is the best show on TV. But yeah, it's been a pretty chill 2 weeks for me as well. Just the normal, working out, watching football. Just the norm pretty much. Playing some video games as always. I was for my weekend Star Wars to throw that in there as well. I didn't have like too many like wild like things happening really, other than just talking with people about Andor and talking about like the upcoming Star Wars things, whether it be like Tales of the Jedi or Mando or Bad Batch, like just having different discussions about that, and just playing a little classic Battlefront 2 a few days ago. That's always fun to hop on there and play that, and just work on just ranking your guys up and whatnot. But that's been pretty chill for me.
Yeah, I've been busy with the games too, between Overwatch 2 and Destiny 2 and multiverses and a whole bunch of other stuff coming out. It's like, oh, this is the time we like as gamers. This quarter 4 is like the Christmas for gamers basically. But yeah, I mean, Battlefront 2, man, you can't beat it.
Oh yeah, it's always fun, and of course, games have gotten more, I would say, difficult nowadays. So like your skill level compared to some of those games back then may be better than like say what the AI is. So like the easiest way for anybody going back to play any of those games, like just put it on the hardest difficulty, and it's definitely hard.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of games, this is actually my week in Star Wars. And I texted you guys last week about this. I went down to a store that I usually go to in Maryland. I was able to pick up Star Wars Jedi Starfighter on PlayStation 2.
Yep.
And I got Star Wars Racer. I guess it's the Pod Racer for Nintendo 64.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't played them yet. Plan on playing them probably in the next couple weeks. I know for the holidays we're going to play it, but I would like to sit down and at least start one of these games in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I was always jealous of the PlayStation crowd because you guys got Jedi Starfighter and the regular Starfighter, which is exclusive to the console. And as we all know on this channel, I mean, I don't dislike PlayStation, but I only ever owned the PlayStation 1. So I missed out on all the PS2, PS3, PS4, and PS5 games. And that was one of them. So I was like, I want to play that because I believe that game, that the history of that game that was the preview for Attack of the Clones. I think that game might have come out a couple months before Attack of the Clones, and it was actually a prequel to Attack of the Clones. So for those of you that played it,
I think you're thinking of the Clone Wars game. No, you're right, because this is the prequel, and then the Clone Wars game is like after.
Yep.
Episodes, yeah.
It was so cool because they had this new fighter, this new starfighter in Star Wars, and this new protagonist, and I was so intrigued, like, oh, what's going on here? And I think since then, And I will look this up on my Steam library as I'm sitting here, but I think I might have it on Steam now, but maybe not. Jedi Starfighter. Nope. There is no Jedi Starfighter apparently on Steam. I just have the regular Starfighter. So yeah, I'm basically never going to be able to play that game at this point unless I find some kind of like hacked emulated version online. I guess they haven't worked on the code to get that thing up to speed. But yeah, you'll definitely have to tell us like about that game because I'm very curious. I've always been very curious about that one.
Problem.
I had a funny Star Wars this week in Star Wars. It actually happened last night while I was sleeping. and we could go around the room and say if we've ever had a weird Star Wars dream. But anyway, this one's very bizarre. So I had a dream that I was, my profession is I'm a personal trainer. So I was actually training Kathleen Kennedy at like the Lucasfilm gym. I was training Kathleen Kennedy at the Lucasfilm gym, and it was a pretty vivid dream because I specifically remember asking her, out of all the questions I could ask her, right? I'm training the person that's head of Lucasfilm, and I straight up asked her, I was like, so when are we getting the High Republic action figures from Hasbro? I was like, that's the question I asked her, and it was like, she's like, well, you're going to have to ask Hasbro because I'm not in charge of that entity of the whole thing. And I was just like, wow, I shot my shot and I could have asked her about the Rogue Squadron movie. I could have asked her about Knights of the Republic happening in live action. And man, we'll talk about the High Republic later on and the updates here with New York Comic Con. I guess I had it on the brain or something. But and then it was funny because also elsewhere in the dream, like I remember like going into the back rooms, the back offices I was being like a little delinquent or something because I was going into back offices. I had to grab something for her. Like she forgot her water bottle or something. And she's like, oh, I left it on my desk or something in the office. And I was like, ooh, I can go in there and see if there's like any scripts or something that are like on the table on her desk or something. So I remember like going in this one room and there was just like a bunch of like empty boxes and like it was really bizarre. But I woke up from the dream and I was like, damn, that would have, because I'll be honest with you, a long time ago, not even a long time ago, a lot of these corporate places they have gyms. That was a whole big entity of like my profession was like corporate wellness, where you have gyms inside of big corporate buildings. Of course, with work from home, that whole entity got wiped off the face of the earth. That stuff doesn't exist anymore. But I actually did send out an email or two to the people over there at the Skywalker Ranch at one point, like, hey, do you guys have a gym that needs a trainer to watch? So of course nobody got back to me after that. But I've had other dreams about like George Lucas, for instance. One of my dreams was like I was down the shore at our family's bungalow and George Lucas like stopped over to have a drink at the tiki bar. Like funny, random funny things like that. I'll throw it over to you guys. Have you ever had like a Star Wars celebrity in a dream or something like that?
I mean, I guess we're keeping on work. Look, I work for our local county government, and so yeah, and you guys seen my office with like the pictures and the Boba Fett helmets and stuff. So like I've had like dreams about my job, but I've had a dream about Star Wars in my job where like I'm dealing with like some type of with a kid, and all of a sudden like Skywalker pops out of nowhere because he's just on my mind. Maybe I watched Star Wars that night, and then I had like a big meeting the next day, and I think just both my work and Star Wars kind of just meshed. Like I know those dreams happened before. And obviously with me seeing my Boba Fett helmet and my Ahsoka and Luke Skywalker figure in my office, is kind of like it's always around. So I think that's probably why like I have those dreams once in a while with Star Wars and then with my work. So yeah, it's happened. Now I can't remember anything crazy like work related with like my dreams, but I know like Luke has been in a couple of them, I think, because of what I see every day.
Damn, yeah, I haven't had like a character show up. That'd be crazy if like Kyle Katarn just like, or Dash Rendar just showed up in my dream. I would wake up and be so angry if that was the case.
Those are both great. For me, I mean, the only one I really can remember that I had like specifically was a year or two ago. It was around this time, around Halloween time. I watch the original Halloween every October because, like, it's a classic and it's one of the best movies ever. And anyways, like, I guess the vibes from that movie, even though it was a Halloween movie, like, this just shows how much we all are into Star Wars. Like, I hadn't even watched any Star Wars that day or anything, but after I got done watching it, I went to bed, and then, like, I had a dream about pretty much a similar vibe, like, to Michael Myers, like, in the Halloween movie, like, Michael Myers is, like, stalking around, like, the neighborhoods, like, you see him walking, like, streetlight to streetlight type deal. And, like, I remember, like, real vividly, because, like, see, where I live out in the country, we live in, like, almost it's like a little town outside of our city. And, there's, like, streetlights and stuff. And, like, I remember, like, in my dream, like, going outside, like, hearing something and, like, looking down the street and seeing, like, Darth Vader, like, walking, like, pole light to pole light, and me, like, running inside, like, freaking out, like, oh my gosh, we gotta hide. Because, like, he's looking for me or something. And then, like, I woke up and was like, whoa. But that was about the most, like, Star Wars, like, vivid dream I can remember that I've had, was just like that, like, Halloween crossing over with it. That was only a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because Vader Ben, can be stealthy. Yeah, go ahead, Milton.
I was about to say, Ben, have you ever had, like, I don't know if you said it or not, but have you ever had like your dreams, or, like, Star Wars, like, with your job, like, whether it's, like, in your dreams or just daily life in general?
For not necessarily, I would say. I would say, I mean, of course, like, Star Wars is in, like, daily life and stuff, but I would because my stuff is more, fitness as well. So, like, I don't know, I really haven't had any, like, direct, like, interesting dreams like you, Chris, with the whole gym at Skywalker Ranch thing. More of just, related to, like, fitness. Like, I've, more thought along the lines of, like, just outside of dreaming, like, the whole wonder what they were doing in Star Wars for fitness, like, in universe.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Like, that's always an interesting thing to me, because, like, I guess it's just one of those whole things of, like, just don't ask questions type deal for Star Wars, because, like, we know with astronauts here, like, they lose so much muscle and body mass when they go up into space for even a few months. And, like, in Star Wars, they're just, like, traveling around the galaxy, staying the same. So, I don't know, it's just interesting. It's just interesting thinking about that. But yeah, I mean, that's more of, like, the crossover with, like, the fitness stuff that I thought about in terms of Star Wars.
Well, I know with my job, though, like, because, like I said, I work with a lot of, kids, and, like, young teenagers. So, like, sometimes when there's an opportunity, especially if I know a kid likes Star Wars, I'll talk about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a big Star Wars head, and we talk about it. Actually, I had this one kid, he always talked about the Millennium Falcon. I was like, oh yeah, it's a dope ship. Every time we saw him, we talked about, Obi-Wan, anytime. So it's nice that I can bring Star Wars into my work, like, kind of build a rapport with, like, the kids that I work with. So
yeah, it breaks down walls.
Oh, yeah.
It's sick. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Star Wars is such a good barrier breaker, in my opinion, because, like you said, it breaks down walls for kids, for elderly, for people in between. I mean, heck, there's everyone knows here, like, I love to play Madden. Like, there's a couple Madden YouTubers I follow. They stream on Twitch and stuff, and it's funny, like, back when Kenobi was on, I had asked a question to the guy in his chat, and he happened to see it, and, like, he's one of the biggest Madden Twitch YouTubers there are, and he saw my question and was like, because I asked him, like, what's he think of Kenobi so far and all this stuff, and he's like, Kenobi's fine and everything. He's like, but don't get me started on some of this Disney Star Wars stuff, because I'll go on a 2-hour PowerPoint presentation on why it's not doing great. So I was like, oh my gosh. And it's just funny because, like, even with, like, people in other genres, like, they're passionate about it, and, you just don't know it because, they're content creators focusing on something else, and like, it turns out he's, like, a pretty hardcore, like, in the weeds Star Wars nerd as well. So it's like, that's cool. So it's just cool, like, seeing, Star Wars crossing over to other, parts of life.
Yeah. So everybody listening after the fact, everybody, including Dark Nerdy Gonzo in our live chat right here on YouTube, we want to hear what your Star Wars crossover dreams are, how strange it could be. Let us know in the comment section down below, or send us out a shout on Twitter. But yeah, getting into our housekeeping, if you are watching on YouTube, we have an offering of this show on any podcast streaming service, whether it be Spotify or Amazon Music or Google or any other platform. We are there for you to download, and we go live every Friday at 9 o'clock Eastern. If you want to join, as I said, Gonzo in the chat, as well as the many others we have that are loyal followers chiming in on our discussions here. We had quite a few things that got released this last 2 weeks. I'll catch up for the last 2 weeks, I suppose. First of all, we had a huge launch of a brand new Star Wars initiative, the High Republic Phase 2, 150 years before Phase 1. So yeah, roughly about 400 years before A New Hope is where we are currently at in the newest High Republic story. So we have the book, The Path of Deceit. That's a young adult novel. We also have the comics written by Cavan Scott, as well as at least one or two insider short stories. So we have all that going on. We also have a really cool thing, which is the Visions comic book from Marvel. It's basically a new story telling the tale of Ronin, who we've seen from the duel in the shorts that came out almost just a little over a year ago at that point. Like, time's flying by. I remember binging all those on a vacation that I had. So yeah, really cool artwork. Yeah.
I was going to say, to throw in there real quick before you move on from Visions. So here's a funny story. When you put that in our show notes tonight, I was like, wait a second. I was like, what is this for? Because at first I thought it was like new Visions episodes on Disney Plus. So I got on Disney Plus really quick at 8 o'clock and was like, oh wait, okay, there's no new Vision stuff, so it must be a book.
Yeah, but it's all black and white. You know what? I could probably show you right now, real quick. Let me show you some pages. Okay, so what we have going on here is with Ronin, as I said. So it's very striking because it's all done by the same artist and the same storyteller, who I don't want to butcher his name, Takashi Azaki. But basically it's all black and white, but it's accented, it's accented with the red blades of the lightsabers. Let me try to open up to a cool action shot here. Like, this artwork is insane. This is stuff you would get like tattoos of. This is like killer. Oh, yeah. This is like killer artwork here. So yeah, it's got a new story. He encounters like a Jedi, because we know in this canon verse, if you will, of this timeline, there's like the Sith Empire and the Jedi and all that sort of thing. So it's going off of that timeline. But yeah, very, very enjoyable for sure. We also had a couple other Star Wars comics. We had Star Wars issue number 28, where Luke Skywalker literally goes to Coruscant to get the Crimson Dawn double agents that have information of the Death Star 2. So yes, he tells Mon Mothma, I have it confirmed that there is a Death Star 2. So it's only a matter of time before the Bothans get involved with Star Wars at this point. So I'm looking forward to that. And we had the Mandalorian issue number 4 that came out, which is, simply put, just a recap of issue number 4, episode number 4, which is interesting because it's like the first piece of canon Star Wars that has Cara Dune in it, because Cara Dune has been wiped from the face of everything. And I mean, part of me was going to be shocked if she wasn't in there, but a part of me was like, this entire story of this episode is revolving around her, so it'd be kind of weird for them to write this story and not have her in it. So,
well, I mean, you never know. Like, I could have easily seen them doing that, honestly. Like, that's the thing. Like, we're at a point with like a lot of stuff with like her, with Gina Carano, and any actor really that has any, I guess you would say, like, dismissal from the movie or the company they're with. They, they pretty much act like they didn't exist a lot of the times.
So. By the way, I have to get onto this little side tangent here, and we're gonna basically get into the New York Comic Con stuff, because I have some funny things to say here. At least one funny thing, I think, anyway. Gonzo thought it was funny and priceless, as he says in the chat room, before I forget about it. So me and Gonzo hung out. He's from New Jersey too. Actually, I met Aaron Daly there again. Chris Forsyth. So anybody that's familiar with our chat, yeah, I basically like hung out with all of our usual crew here because we're all from the tri-state area. So I went to go buy. I'm not gonna like make this too. I don't even know the employee, but anyway, I went to the book booth to pick up the new High Republic book, which I had already read because I had it sent to me early to review. So, you know, I get it. Like, it could be a little convoluted with the Star Wars timeline, especially when you're trying to do a prequel to something like the prequels were like, oh, yeah, the prequels are taking place before original trilogy, and that was the first ones that came out. So basically, I had a conversation with one of the employees where we were going back and forth because I was telling my friend who was not in the chat room here, is another guy, Teddy, friend from work. He was asking me, oh, what book do I start with the High Republic? Because we were at the official place. I said, oh, you can start with the Light of the Jedi. And then the person came over and she was like, oh, you can start at any of these books. I was like, you could. And then I pointed to the new book, the one I was just talking about, The Path of Deceit. It's got the blue cover, the new blue logo, which means it's in phase 2. And I was like, technically, you could start at this book because this book precedes everything. It's the newest book, but it's also the prequel. And then, so basically, I was going back and forth with the employee here who was steadfast. It's like, no, you can't start there. You have to start at this book. And I was like being very, very kind, very patient, and just being like, no, actually, you know, this is a prequel. You know, like the prequels, like the Phantom Menace technically starts before, you know, original trilogy. So I was going back and forth, and eventually, like, I just sort of walked away because I was like, I don't want to, like, ruin this employee's day, but like I'm not getting through to this person, so let me just walk away. So I just picked up the book and walked away. But Gonzo was there, and he was kind of like snickering in the background because he's seen me in my element, like going into the lore stuff, like, oh, you gotta start. It was like such a Comic-Con type of moment where like you get really into the weeds with something and you're trying to convince somebody and you're like, I accept that I know what I'm talking about, and maybe they are a little bit misinterpreting the thing. So anyway, that was a funny little thing that happened there.
Yeah, that's funny.
But yeah, let me. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna interject real quick. I'm not sure on my end. I might not be able to see you, Chris. I can see you, Milton. Can you see Chris?
Yes, I can see him.
Okay.
I can see myself on Discord. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, just checking. All right, then I might have pressed a button, so I can't see you, Chris. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, so that was a funny little interaction. But generally speaking, it was a very pleasant experience. New York Comic Con in general, just not even talking about Star Wars, just a general outlook of everything. You know, New York Comic Con was always fun because it's fandoms all combined in one roof. And this time they expanded the Javits Center. The construction's finally complete that they were working on for 5 years. So now even the showroom floor got expanded a little bit more. So we have a lot more going on. The bigger booths were back. Funko, Marvel, DC had like a little booth with Titans from that universe and all those things. A lot of anime this year. A lot of anime if you're a fan of, like, there's a thing called Chainsaw Man and One Piece and Demon Slayer and Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, it was a very much like a lot of cool stuff like that, which I'm not personally into, but I can appreciate the fans love that stuff. Genshin Impact, they had like a lot of cool gaming activations there. But specifically talking about Star Wars, there were 2 panels. As I mentioned 2 weeks ago, there was the High Republic panel on Saturday. There was the Lucasfilm Publishing panel on Sunday. So the High Republic panel was really cool. It was like they brought out the big guns. Like the New York Comic Con was like the place to be if you're going to be a High Republic fan. And my buddy from Ion Canon, Matthew Negebauer, he was basically so jealous of me because he's a huge High Republic fan. He's like, that's it, I'm going next year, because I did something I never did before, which was I live tweeted the High Republic panel. So I was like taking photos. I was frantically typing away on my phone. It was definitely something that I didn't think I'd be doing, but my buddies over at the Star Wars Underworld were not going to be there, so I figured, oh, they usually do this. Let me return the favor, because I usually follow their live tweets. So I was like, if they're not going to do it, I'm going to pick up the mantle. So that's what I did, and I wasn't the only one that was doing it. There was some other people like Friends of the Force and other Star Wars content creators apparently were out there in the crowd, but Yeah, they basically brought up phase one and all those authors, and then they brought all the phase two authors. So literally every author was in the building. All like what is it, like 9 of them, 10 if you count Michael C. Glenn, the creative. So there was even the artist Arya Anadito came up there from Indonesia. It was crazy. They brought everybody over. Some things they announced, cover reveals for some of the phase 2 books like Cataclysm, Quest for Planet X, and Path of Vengeance. They basically revealed that we're gonna get a new kid book, Yoda and the Youngling Kids. New manga, Edge of Balance, President in May 2023. They have a cool book coming out, which is going to be an anthology, young adult novel of all these short stories, kind of like what is it, the Certain Point of View books, but like High Republic stories. It's going to be nice. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, so that's going to be really fun. But it was interesting because like around 6 o'clock today, they put up the High Republic. They usually do like every 2 months, like a High Republic video on the Star Wars YouTube channel. And of course they had all the New York Comic-Con coverage, and I got a little kick out of this. I sent it to the chat. I was like, hey, I could see my blurry, half obscured face looking at my phone, frantically typing on my in the background when they were looking at the crowd. So I was like, oh, that was my 1 second of fame. Not really. You would have no idea it's me unless I was the only person I could figure that was me. That's how blurry I am in the camera. But I was like, oh, I'm on that side of the room. I know I'm at that side somewhere. And I seen Gonzo's face. Because I was like, oh, there's Gonzo. I looked at, oh, there's me, so there we go. I got a kick out of that, but it was pretty cool because like I said, they used New York Comic-Con as a launch point for Phase 2, since Phase 2 literally started like 2 days before Comic-Con. So Lucasfilm had like a booth with like a big mural of like the High Republic. So they were really bringing the big guns to Comic-Con this year, and I would expect that they're going to probably do the same. If you're a High Republic fan, you live anywhere near the East Coast, you might want to pick up tickets for Comic-Con 2023 because Phase 3 is starting off in November, so I bet you they're going to probably have a big celebration like they did this year. Apparently they had a big like video in Times Square like going on all weekend with like the Phase 2 trailer. Yeah, they make trailers for Star Wars books now. It's crazy. So on Sunday night, me and my girlfriend, I literally was like, hey, we got to go to Times Square to watch a stupid Star Wars book trailer video. And she doesn't really like going there because it's like all like tourists, obviously. And she's like local. She's like, we gotta go. I could tell. I was like, we're gonna go. And then, so I stood around in Times Square waiting for like 10 minutes, waiting for this stupid video. And then I realized, oh, they probably took it down. It's probably not going on anymore. So we went there for no reason. It's just like we're in the middle of this crowd. And here I am just like staring at the one video wall that I know it's going to be on because I've seen a Twitter video. It's right above the Disney store. I'm like looking at my watch, just like, okay, 5 minutes went by. It was like looping the same video over and over. I'm like, there's still a chance. So I'll give it another 10 minutes. And I was like, the walk of shame. I was like, well, that was a waste of time. But, yeah.
Sounds like you guys have fun, no matter what. It's all that matters.
Yeah.
And out and about like that, that's always fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so then I'll just quickly go over the, the publishing panel, the other official thing going on there. That was on Sunday. I barely made it there because, as we all do, we go to Comic-Con. We have fun at night after the con closes, and well, it was a late night to say the least. Not as late as I was expecting, but I wasn't, 100% will say that. I made it there. Thanks to Gonzo for saving me a seat, by the way, man. He's the MVP this time around. Because I think I was like the last person in that room at that point before they closed it off. Because it was a packed house. But we got there and they announced a new Star Wars book. You guys are probably going to like it specifically. It's about an Inquisitor. It's Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah S. Dawson. She wrote the Captain Phasma novel. I don't know if either of you have read that. And she's also written the Black Spire tie-in book for Galaxy's Edge. But she's really good at writing villains specifically. So I love this. When Disney Lucasfilm like make a project that is not tying into anything concurrently happening in Star Wars. This is not like, as much as I love Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, yeah, they're making a book because they're trying to promote the new game. It's like this book is coming out of nowhere, just random part in a timeline. So I feel like we're gonna get some really good juicy details out of like how a Jedi goes from being a Jedi after Order 66 to becoming an Inquisitor. And yes, we've gotten a similar story from literally Jedi Fallen Order when you see what's her name, the second sister becoming the second sister being tortured by the Sith. But to get this in a full-fledged full-length novel, especially with a veteran writer on board, this character's name is Kat. The really interesting about this character is they didn't make her, she's not a brand new character. She's actually in the Darth Vader comics from Charles Soule. You guys might have read these. Issue 19 and issue number 20 specifically, from what I've seen. She's like this red-skinned, almost looks like a Sith pureblood type of alien, if you're familiar with the Old Republic. But I think she gets like impaled by Vader's lightsaber at the end of the issue 20. But as we all seen, you could survive getting impaled by a lightsaber. I mean, we've seen Inquisitors, both of them survive. Grand Inquisitor, the third sister. It's like Reva survives. It's like, well, anymore. You get stabbed, you can still live. So that's that one. But we have Sana Starros. Remember, she's from the comics. She was that one character making the headlines when she first appeared in Star Wars issue number 7, I want to say, when she shows up on the scene and says, "Where's my husband?" and points to Han Solo, because they had this whole like thing going on. You remember that one, Ben?
Oh, yep. I remember that one. I feel like that's like the biggest. I mean, I'm sure there's other things that have gone on with her character in canon, but I feel like that's like her biggest or most notable moment, like for a lot of people, because of that. Because it was that whole thing of like, holy smokes, wait, Han had another wife?
Yeah, it's freaking crazy. So yeah, that we got the High Republic Chronicles of the Jedi, which is like an in-universe like source book explaining different things. Also the High Republic the lightsaber collection, which I'm actually really excited for because I never bought. They have a regular lightsaber collection book, which just shows you like the really cool hilts and gives you like an explanation from like an artistic perspective of them, I guess. But the lightsaber designs in the High Republic are freaking sick. Like you look at Stellan Gios's lightsaber, you look at the Blade of Bardotta's his lightsaber design, which is on the cover, the hilts. They're very intricate, very ornate, and definitely stand out. You look at the original trilogy sabers, and you're like, those things look like pieces of crap compared to, the height of the Jedi we're using. So I'm excited for that. On Sunday, I went and I seen Poe Dameron himself in a panel. Oscar Isaac took the stage for a spotlight panel. That was a lot of fun. Talked about Moon Knight, talked about, Poe Dameron and Star Wars, and just a bunch of random stuff. He made kind of a joke with because obviously Oscar Isaac and, well, I don't know if it's obvious or not. I actually didn't know this. Oscar Isaac and Pedro Pascal are buddies. I don't know if you knew this.
Oh no, I didn't realize that.
So they had this funny little feud going on, or I don't know. Oscar Isaac was basically saying like they're like romantically involved, and if they were, then like Pedro Pascal is the slut in the relationship or something. That was probably the funniest thing in the panel, but I forget what the context was.
That's funny.
That was funny, and another cool story that happened. So I went to this after party. That's the one on Saturday before the other panel I showed up almost late for, because I was at this one party for Yellow Jackets, which I didn't really know about. I heard something. It's a Showtime show involving these girls from my own home state, New Jersey, going to a national soccer tournament. They crash land in this airplane, and basically they survive in this wilderness of Canada for whatever reason. They have to live there for like 17 months in the wilderness, and they basically devolve into being cannibals. So that's the whole premise of this bright, cheery TV show. And they were having a party themed after that at the Javits Center, which it was really effing cool, because it was all like these trees and fog, and you felt like you're in the forest, and they had like free drinks and free food, and they were giving away gym bags with like mugs. Those studio parties are the best. It's always a highlight for me to go to those things at New York Comic Con. But anyway, before I even got in there, I was waiting in this line, and I guess there was a press room that was right next to the queue that was going into this party. And I seen a really tall figure walking by, and the door was only like 10 feet away to get into this press room that I found out what it was after the fact. And guess who I seen? I mean, there's not really any other 7-foot tall women out there that are actors, but I seen freaking Gwendolyn Christie just like walking by me. I'm like,
dang.
What the hell? Like, Brienne of Tarth, Captain Phasma herself just like walked by, but it was so funny because I'd never seen her with her like hair down, because she's in the Wednesday show, and they had a panel for Wednesday like at 8:00, and I was waiting in line at 7:30, so I'm guessing they were like in a press room because there was all journalists and reporters that I kind of recognized from different outlets. And she like had to walk in this room, and then like 10 minutes later like walked right back out of the room and went right back behind the curtain again. But like I could see her, and then I said something, and like everybody else in the line like just like looked away from their phones for like a minute, and we're like, oh crap, and then like it's Brienne, and like it was like a frenzy of like paparazzi where like everybody like got their phones, it's like, oh my god, like it was crazy. But like that's the kind of fun stuff at Comic-Con. You'll just see like random like celebrities just like walking by. It's like, what, kind of thing, like double take.
Oh yeah. Oh, and I was going to ask you too, since you'd gone there, how was The Walking Dead's presence with their final? I mean, I know this is a Star Wars show, but with it being their final season, did they have a pretty big presence there?
I mean, they did. You'll have to ask my friend Teddy, because he was at the panel. I could have gone to the panel, but I didn't, because part of me wants to still watch the show and not be spoiled. And I'm sure they probably talked about spoilers in the panel, and I'm a little bit like, I don't want to do that right now. But he enjoyed it. My friend said, they showed off stuff, but like all the Daryl was there, and I don't know who else was there, actually. Whoever the actors that are still alive at this point, I guess the big ones.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, that's cool.
Oh man, yeah. So yeah, it's just a really fun time. We just did a lot of panels, seen Jack Black from the basically they showed a Super Mario Brothers movie trailer. And then Jack Black made a surprise appearance on stage and like sat down on this big ass like throne with Bowser, and was like just having a lot of fun with the crowd and just driving off everybody. But yeah, I've seen a lot of Amazon stuff. I seen this new show. It's like kind of like Westworld, called The Peripheral, which is basically you put on this Oculus like headset looking thing, and it like transports you to like 70 years future London, and that looks really cool. Seen a Rings of Power panel, and it was like the week before the last episode came out, so they were pretty tight-lipped of what was happening, but pretty exciting nonetheless. And yeah, I guess other than that, that was really it. I just did the couple Star Wars panels. Oh, I can't forget, I always mention this, the Star Wars meetup happened on Saturday at 2:00, and my buddy Gonzo was there. My buddy Chris Forsyth, who often sounds off in the chat, Aaron was there. So a lot of us were just hanging out, and it was bigger than ever. They had the whole like Mandalorian Death March going on, so you can actually see that. I have a cosplay video on the channel right now of like somewhere halfway through the 3-minute video. You'll see me just like running in front of this crowd as I seen them walking through like the main concourse area of the Javits Center, and there is actually like 30 Mandalorians probably just walking. It's so cool seeing the Mandalorians because they all customize their armor. It's not like there's like 30 Din Djarins or Boba Fett. It's like everybody has different armor. Like really cool. Like I've seen one guy that looked like he was from like Vietnam era, where you see those planes that had like the shark teeth on the helicopters in the plane. Like his helmet like looked like that. It was like all camo and stuff. I was like, holy crap! Cool. It's like a soldier V. It's like yeah. Like there was a bantha, like this one dude had like crate dragon skulls like on his shoulders. He had like bantha horns that like came down his face. He had like there's people like miniguns. Like apparently there was a Din Djarin with a swoop bike that was like on wheels. Smokes. I didn't see that guy. He was outside. I guess he couldn't like bring the whole thing up the flight of stairs, obviously. But yeah, it was the creativity with these costumes, like, oh man, I'm so envious of people that can like do the armor stuff, because I just deal with the soft stuff like the Jedi. Like I was Cal Kestis with the BD1. Everybody loved the BD1. It's very uncomfortable, not uncomfortable, but the BD1 that sits on my shoulder, it's like I have to constantly adjust him because he slides forward. I have to devise some better thing for Celebration. I'll probably bring him out in April, but if he survives the 7-hour across the water plane ride that time. But anyway, yeah, I digress. I it's 40 minutes in. I'll shut up for a little bit, but I mean, I had a great time, as I always do. And for any of you that are even questioning, should I go, I'd say definitely recommend. If you are in the East Coast, it's the place to be. As I said, for all the fandoms, you'll see Marvel, DC, a lot of mashup costumes of all of them combined, just different like little fun things going on there. And you'll see like the craziest costumes. Like you'll be walking around, you'll see a Kool-Aid man walking around, you'll see like some like red balloon ribbon dog thing that I have no idea is from. I see Napoleon Dynamite, and I got him to dance for my cosplay video. I'd even ask him, like he just started dancing for the video. I was like, this is perfect. So you can check out that video. I'm gonna be putting up a vlog video of just like all the random stuff I did later on in the weekend. If you're watching this, or you probably will be up by the time you hear this on Monday if you're listening to the podcast. But yeah, very fun times. And yeah, you too. I know you're a little closer than the people over there on the West Coast, so definitely try to come one of these years because it is a blast.
It sounds like it. Like you said, I mean, talking 40 minutes about it isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's clear you had a good time. It's obviously well worth it. Even specifically just for like the Star Wars fans going, a good Star Wars presence. And then of course, like you said, like to me, when it comes to like conventions like this, or even like sporting events, like I'm going to a Browns game later this fall, Thanksgiving weekend actually. And sure, you can stay home and watch like things on TV, whether it be like the sporting event or the Comic Cons or the whatever, But like to me, the biggest part about going there is like the atmosphere of hanging out with the other fans of the movies or the shows or the sports or whatever it may be. Like it's always so much fun, like the social side of things, like going to those type of events.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been to like some signing stuff before, and I mean, like I said, it could be a big signing or a small one, but you get to spend time with people, that have something very similar to you, and when it comes to interest, and just spending time with them and just learning about their backgrounds, but also saying that, hey, we're here for the same thing. So yeah, it's definitely a goal of mine, because I know a couple buddies of mine are thinking about going to WrestleMania 23, or not 23, WrestleMania, is it 53 next year, or whatever, whenever it is next year. But that's in Philadelphia. So they split that in 2 nights. So we might go to one of those. That's always been a dream of mine, to go to WrestleMania. So same with Comic Cons or any type of like big conventions. Eventually, it will happen. It's just when you have responsibilities, you have to financially budget yourself. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it smart. Like, I spent a little bit more on food than I wanted to, and the good thing about Comic-Con is you could bring in like 4 or 5 water bottles and like 2 snacks and a lunch if you would. They will. Nowadays, it's really good. They streamline the security. They don't even like check your bags. You go through an X-ray machine now, and you don't even have to like undo your bags. So they don't care. You could bring in. So I could have brought in sandwiches and stuff and made it at home and brought it in and saved money. You know what I mean? So, but there was a few times where like a few days where I was like, the first day I was like, screw it, I'm gonna buy breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it was like, whoa, $60-$70 later just on myself. That's like not the best thing. Oh, let me show you something. I almost forgot my show and tell here. I got a Star Wars book bag, but it's way too far away from me to grab at this point. But it's cool because it actually holds a helmet of my Mandalorian helmet, which is really a nice feature. I got a really cool Rogue Squadron like in-universe like jacket with like actual like patches of like veteran of Yavin, Hoth, and all this. It is so badass. I spent more money than I wanted to on it, but I had to get it. But I have some smaller things to show you. I got some cool toys. So I got this Sergeant Creel Black Series figure. This is a character from the comic book, so I like the box because it's literally just like the issue that he's in. So you can see him. I'm not going to obviously take him out of the box or anything, but it's just a stormtrooper with a cool pauldron that has the Imperial logo, and he's got the lightsaber there. So cool stuff there. But the one, I treat Comic-Con like a scavenging hunt, where I have things that are like on my mind, and it's like I could easily buy these off Amazon, or I could just have fun when I go to Comic-Con every year and just like have that the one thing that I'm going to look out for on my checklist, just to be excited. And I actually found them.
Well, that's understandable though, because like you mentioned, of course, going to like a Comic-Con or an event like that, you don't want to like just blow money every single day on every little possible chance.
Yeah.
But having basically like a vacation like that, you want to spend money on it just because it's like if it's once a year, who cares? Like what's a couple $100 or something, like if you want to spend it on a collectible or a thing like that, because it's like when are you if it's only once a year, then it's not a big deal. It'd be a big deal if it was like every weekend or something. Then it might be. But for vacations and stuff, it's fine. That's like back when we went to Hawaii back in January. I mean, our listeners probably remember when I went there. We got some nice souvenirs and different odds and ends things, because who knows when the next time we'll go back to Hawaii. So like it's just a matter of like enjoying yourself, but not like just going crazy.
Yeah. And the other figure I got was this, the one I had on my list. I was like, I gotta find me a good old Cobb Vanth. I mean, look at how good the sculpt on his face is. I mean, I'm shocked at how good that looks like for like Timothy Oliphant's likeness right there. There we go.
It looks really good, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it's kind of annoying though, because they make the box slightly bigger by having like an additional accessory. Then they charge you like $10 more because they're like, oh, it's a deluxe edition. I'm like, really? So yeah, I paid like $35 for this darn guy, but I'm used to the Black Series figures used to like costing like $17-18. So between the two of those, it was like $70. Boom, right there. So that was the only, and I bought like 2 graphic novels. I bought Batman Hush. I got a good deal on that for like 20-something bucks, I think. And then I bought the Devil's Reign Marvel event, which has like Daredevil and Elektra and Kingpin. I bought that, and I think and I bought the Star Wars book, The Path of Deceit, that I was talking about earlier. And yeah, so I mean, in reality, I didn't really spend that much, but I was like, man, between the food and the drinks, that probably would have costed like damn near equal to what I spent on merch. So I will caution people, it's not cheap going to the city. So try to like, budget your money on food at least if you can. Maybe just go out for dinner and try to like get something cheap for breakfast and lunch. Because every meal there is like going to be $20, Oh, $20.
I imagine.
$20 for a hamburger and fries. $20 for this. It's like they have the food trucks and you'll wait out there for like 30 minutes to get your food. So it's like you got to think about that too. Because if you're going from panel to panel, you have to kind of get there like 30 minutes before a panel starts so you can try to get a good seat at least. So like the time flies by because you'll be like, oh, I got plenty of time. I have like 2 hours to kill. And the next thing you know, you're like, where did the day go? Like I had all this time and I'm going home now. So that happened a few times. And 4 days spent there seems like a lot for a lot of people. But when you have a schedule and things you're trying to do, parties and panels and just going on the showroom floor, I barely was in Artist Alley. I'll be honest. I did like a quick walkthrough of Artist Alley. I brought my comics to get signed and I never got signed because I was there for like 20 minutes. I could have spent a whole day down there, but yeah, I digress. We're going to move on to our Andor discussion here. We're going to start with episode 5. We got a good amount of time to talk about them, but maybe not as in depth as we would on a normal episode here. But we actually don't really have any news because, Comic-Con was the news of the week anyway. So it actually worked out in our favor here. But I'll throw it over to Milton, man. What did you think of episode 5, the episode that came out the previous week, the one called The Axe Forgets?
So is this the one, just because I just watched it last week, and like I said, I just watched today's episode like 2 hours ago.
Oh, okay.
So this is this is the one where she meets Lucian in the shop.
No, this is the one.
Remind me how this one went so I don't forget, because I kind of forget a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's all good because I mean these episodes are good, but sometimes not a lot happens on the surface level, right? So it's not like Boba Fett where we're like, oh, this action moment happens here and this big thing happens. This is more of a subdued episode. This is the episode where we had more going on with Andor planning, learning how to march,
Oh, that's
having a
right. They're marching.
conversation with with
Okay. They're
Skeen.
preparing to go to meet the people.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Yep. Because this is where I think doesn't what's your name? Oh my God, female character, the lead.
Mon
Mon
Mothma.
Mothma. And she had the thing with her husband at one point with the seating chart. Talk about that, or that's the previous episode before.
That was the previous episode. So this one,
Right, it's all confusing.
this one we actually get to meet her family though, which is interesting. We actually get to meet her daughter.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, her daughter.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So this is why I'm confused because this show, I will say, is one of my complaints. I'll get to the negative later,
Yep.
but that particular episode wasn't too bad. I did like the scene where Andor and the three other guys, and even those two chicks, are like preparing and talking about like obviously how they're going to penetrate the eye or whatever they're calling that particular place.
Yep.
And they talked about like I guess the importance of like that festival or that celebration. They kind of hinted at a little bit. I like that, and it was nice to see how you're seeing Cassian's development. You're seeing what he's going to become when we get to the Rogue One movie. So you're seeing how he's kind of like a hard ass. He's like, I just want to get my money, do the job, and be out. And obviously that's reflective in the last episode, for the most recent one. So yeah, I thought that was a good part. That particular episode though didn't do it for me.
Yeah.
Kind of was like, because didn't feel like Mon Mothma and her husband, they were in the car at the end of that episode.
Yep.
And now I did like that scene over there. She was talking about, he mentioned something about, I guess, pressure on her or something. And I was like, okay, that makes sense because she's starting to feel it. And I think I was thinking to myself, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just throw in there real quick. Yeah, because in that one, she mentions like how, there's pressure on her and there's more and more people like basically keeping an eye on her, like what she's up to, basically.
They're watching her, right? So I was thinking, I think I mentioned this before, but I think the one thing the show does well is that they make fear and paranoia like very much part of the show. It's a character itself.
I like that.
Anytime I see Mon Mothma, I'm thinking, well, who's watching her? Who's going to reveal that they're a traitor or like they're working for the Empire, in her ranks. Honestly, I think it's the husband, low key. I think the husband might be a spy for the rebellion, or excuse me, the Imperials.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about the daughter, so I really don't think that will come into play. Honestly, every time she's on the screen, Mon Mothma, I pay attention. And anytime any Imperial stuff's on the screen, I pay attention. That particular episode didn't quite do it for me, because honestly, I don't remember a lot of it. That's how much I was like, all right, it's whatever.
That's the thing, right? If you look back at the episode and you're like, what happened? I mean, obviously, episodes need to make an impression, right? I mean, they shouldn't force me to watch the episode again to like be like, what happened again? I mean, I watch every episode twice, but here's the thing. This is a turning point, guys. This is a milestone. So I think I've said this a couple times on the podcast. I watched the episode the day it comes out, and then I'll watch it again later on with my mom, who's been watching every Star Wars series. She literally told me, I got something to tell you today, Chris. I'm not really liking the new Andor show. I think I'm going to stop watching it. And I was like, oh, man. I was like, shut me down.
Your mom said that?
Yeah.
You know what, though? I'm with your mom there.
I know.
This is crazy. Like, this particular show is not trash. Like, I just want to make it very clear. Like, the show isn't trash. Because I will say this past episode is better. Like, it was such a better episode compared to episode 5. But like, legit, there are times when I'm watching the show and I'm on my phone just like paying attention to something else. And I see it, but I'm not like sucked in. The only time I got sucked in was whenever they showed like the last scene when she's on Coruscant talking to like the Republic. I'm like, okay, because I'm interested in that stuff. But the other stuff about the show or that particular episode of Last, and even before, I'm just not glued to it. Like, I'm not sucked in. There's moments consistently like out of it, and that's just me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what your mom's saying, but is she saying the same thing?
Yeah, she's basically saying like, oh, I mean, she's like, oh, I'm not liking this as much as like Boba Fett or Mandalorian. And I was explaining to her, I was like, what I was telling Ben the other day, I was like, this is literally like a drama, right? This is not action adventure anymore. Everything Star Wars has been action adventure. Even, well, Obi-Wan too. Obi-Wan's action adventure. This is settling down to be like, okay, this is more like Sopranos or House of Cards or any of those dramas where it's like, okay, character moment, and then build up to this thing, and then character moment. We're following a very present pattern. Like, okay, two setup episodes, then a big climax episode, two setup episodes, a big climax of. So I think like having me understand like, okay, not every episode's going to be that way gets me to stomach it easier. But I think that's her thing. I was like, she gravitates to the more traditional Star Wars, but this is not as traditional as anything else Star Wars has been. It's gonna be getting there, I think, down the line. But these first couple, at least this first half of the series, is definitely something different. Would you agree, Ben?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say about this episode. Like, I think, I definitely agree more, like, or lean more toward like Milton's assessment and even your mom's assessment of the show so far. And that's just because, like, I think we have an underlying issue with the show. And of course, the show is going to continue to like progress and build more and whatnot. But I think part of the issue is Andor. I mean, look, we care about. You're instantly glued to the screen. I mean, you just mentioned it in your breakdown, Milton. You're glued to the screen when it's Mon Mothma or the Imperials, and like Andor is one of these characters. Cassian is one of these characters. Like Diego Luna is great and wonderful and everything, but the thing is, he's a character a lot of us just don't really care about. Like, he's a side character from Rogue One, and of course, Rogue One was more like Jin's movie, and then of course, Darth Vader. A lot of the stuff at the end overshadows that movie, but my thing is, I don't know if a character study for Andor works that well versus like I think if we would have gotten a similar say setup for Book of Boba Fett, two character building episodes with Boba Fett, a character where we have vested interest in, and then an action episode, I think that would have worked for that show even better than this show, just because like say like a general audience person, say like your mom, they probably would be hooked to the show a little more because it's Boba Fett, or a character we know, or like even Kenobi. So I think like the underlying like stuff with Cassian is kind of hurting him just because he's like a side character in the movies. And I think that's part of it. And then like the pacing, like my thing is it's great. Like I saw a great tweet from I can't even remember who it was from. It was like one of those suggested tweets, that pop up on your timeline. It was from some content creator called like Eckert's Ladder, I believe, or something.
Oh yeah.
But anyways,
yep.
Oh yeah, okay. You know what tweet I'm talking about? He posted a thing. It was like, this is great. They're making this type of Star Wars and Star Wars with Andor, but he was basically saying like, it's fine. Like he doesn't want Star Wars to like stop making. Taking chances at making different type of content.
Oh yeah.
But he was leaning toward like preferring more of like the Mandalorian or Kenobi style, etc. Because that's what a lot of it was. And like to me, when it comes to this sort of stuff, like of course you want Star Wars to be able to like take a risk at making content and whatnot. Like you don't want them not to like ever take chances. But a lot of this like begs to question, in my opinion. Does Star Wars need this type of storytelling in universe? Because, I mean, for every other Star Wars thing, like the action thing is what's like in the bloodline of Star Wars. Like that's what works. Like, I mean, that's what worked. Even in Book of Boba Fett, the action episodes worked. And once we get into the 6th episode breakdown, the 6th episode was my favorite one of the season because it worked. Like, I mean, you literally messaged me back as soon as I messaged about the 6th one, Chris, and you were like, yeah, I see what's going on here or whatever, however you responded. And, you broke it down because, like, I think a lot of people may not like more of that, like, slower character storytelling in Star Wars.
Yeah, so let's break down a little bit more depth of episode 5. So we start right off the bat with this. I love, and this is the parts I love about shows like Game of Thrones and stuff. It's just these like one-on-one characters, just talking about like their history, making things on one of other points on one another. You have this character Skeen, and he's got these tattoos. Like this guy was obviously like a convict at one point, and he's like on the run or something. So he's got like this history of just like the tattoos, and that was something in Star Wars that they've never really delved into much. Is like Star Wars tattoos, like the fact that this guy's like prisoner numbers, but then he's like of the hand or something, and then like the crate's head, and like really cool stuff about just these like two guys that were in jail, like just like reminiscing and just talking about the different things and the paranoia that is going through Andor, because he's like, oh, I gotta figure out, like, I can't have anybody have this Kyber crystal. Like this means a lot to Lucian. I can't Luthien, I can't lose this or whatever. So I like that aspect where we have a little bit of like throughout the episode, like this happened a couple times. You're like, man, Andor is like really crazy about this thing, and that's like the one of the like little like mini plots of the episode. But yeah, just everything with the character Skeen. What'd you think of that character, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that whole character, like the sequences with Cassian and that like the lead officer, not the, obviously he's not a bad guy, but like the lead officer who was like getting them to march, like all that stuff. That relationship, I think, is one of the most like interesting ones of the series so far. And like I'm liking some of those moments like that. It's just like the overall, like I feel like some of the scenes are mega extended, but like the moments are good. Like the actors act them out good. Like they, you really felt it when Cassian was like really pressing about getting that Kyber crystal back and stuff. Like you really felt that. So like, Diego Luna's doing a great job in acting, by the way, in this series. And yeah, I thought his acting, or I thought his character moments like there in that scene were really good. I thought that was his best part of that episode specifically. And then of course, as we mentioned, like Mon Mothma, or as Milton mentioned with Mon Mothma, her basically saying like everybody's like, people are watching me, like, the fear like Genevieve O'Reilly like puts across is so good. Like, it's translated really well, just the way she's saying her lines, and like it's her character's really hitting, I think, even a little more than Cassian is, like in terms of like, the character, like the, getting the point across, like they're spooked basically.
Did anybody get the point across that Mon Mothma is almost like a villain in this? Because like I feel like she's easy to hate, kind of, or like the way she's like acting like stuck up, kind of like she's like, oh, like I'm doing my thing, and like her own daughter is like calling her out on it. I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people on the internet are like bagging on the husband. It's like, oh, he's a terrible guy. But I'm like, did you guys watch episode 5? Because like she kind of seems like a jerk a little bit to her own family. Like, oh, I'm gonna do my own thing. Like take you to school or whatever the heck it is. And it's like, no, Dad's taking me to school, and then I don't know.
Well, they I mean, hey. Like...
Oh, I was gonna throw in there real quick. I mentioned, like in the first, I think when we were talking about the first 3 episodes premiere, my thing came like that instantly brings me back to my point I was making when we were reviewing the first 3. Like she may be coming off like that because she hasn't got her hands dirty yet. She's still writing the checks. She's not in the thick of it, But Milton.
I was gonna say they're making her seem like a social media mom, like where like she's gonna post all the pictures, like she's doing stuff with her kid, but the teenager called her out. She's like, "You don't ever take me like to school or whatever. You don't do X, Y, and Z. Why you want to do this now?" And I was like, "Damn, like she must be either a trash mom or very like just unavailable mother." Which I mean, it makes sense with her profession, but even the husband made it seem like that because clearly the daughter. And the husband, or the daughter and the husband have like a very like significant bond together. So he kind of called her out on that too. He's like, "Yeah, you don't normally do that," or something.
Yeah, the interesting. The interesting thing is, I don't know if we went over this in the previous weeks, but Tony Gilroy had put out like a comment on the relationship that's not even pointed out in the show, that apparently they had an arranged marriage, just Perrin and Mon Mothma. like on Chandrilla. They're not out of it for love. It was, I guess, more of like a political maneuver to get them two connected in marriage or something, to join houses together or something like that. So, I mean, that's obviously why they don't seem like they're at least attracted to one another. They're only doing it out of necessity. And apparently the girl was like mentioned in Legends, not even in, it's like, I think it's like an RPG source book, or like one of those like West End game books that they always pull from like the 80s or 90s. So she's like a really deep cut. The fact that Mon Mothma actually has a daughter is interesting. And I mean, geez, you gotta wonder, like, why haven't we heard of this girl? I mean, you always say that with prequel stories, right? It's like, oh, you know, like this character wasn't in these movies, but it's in the prequels. Or that makes, they're automatically dead. It's like, I wonder if we'll see her like show up as like a rebel soldier now in like some retroactive stories, like in comics and stuff going forward, if she survives at least.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance with her. And then, you know, now that I think about it more and more, like Milton, you made a really good point. Like, I think, I mean, instead of leaning toward the husband getting taken out, I could see, you know, especially after your comment as well, Chris, about the arranged marriage, I could see the husband basically saying, you know what, eventually, screw this, I'm leaving. Let's go turn my cranky wife into the Empire and see how this goes, you know?
Ooh.
Because what if we have that the one Imperial chick that we all liked from the meeting, what if we have her like put out like a bounty or a thing on you know, Rebel Uprising, and then you get the husband basically saying, ooh, let's turn her in to, like, you know, when he gets to his breaking point, because no matter what it is, whether the husband dies or turns, the husband is going to be the pushing point for Mon Mothma in this series, I think, because there's no other way to get her into the thick of it.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the Imperials, or the bad guys now, because Daedra Morrow, the Imperial Security Bureau agent, I really like where that side is going, because we get to see almost like a sympathetic Imperial character. Again, like, this is why I love this show, because it's just focusing on people doing their jobs. Like, they're not being inherently evil. They're just working within their system. Same thing with Cyril, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes here in his story so far. But I like how she treats her, like, I wouldn't call, like, her helper, whatever that guy is, the other officer. Like, she's like, oh, like, she's not like that usual Imperial. It's like, I don't care if you've lost sleep, you're gonna keep working. Like, she's like, oh, you can go home. Like, why are you still here? Like it's a very human reaction of like, oh, we're gonna, and how he's given her information. Like, they're trying to figure out the pattern of these attacks. And I love the idea. It's a really good quote which I captured specifically, but it's something along the lines of, it's like, it's too good of a pattern. It's too random to not be a pattern, or something like that.
Oh,
and
yeah,
like,
she says, oh yeah, I think it's too random not to be coordinated, or it's too random not to be a pattern. Like, yeah, it's something along those lines, which that means, you know, we're going to be getting something with that's going to pay off into something as well.
Oh yeah, and we'll hear about that. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes when we talk about episode 6. But Milton, what do you think about the whole conversation at the breakfast nook with Cyril and his mother?
I mean, I don't know. Like, that guy's kind of weird. I don't even care. Honestly, I forgot about that character until you just mentioned him. Honest to God.
He's like one of the most compelling characters in the show.
He doesn't do anything. Like I mean,
well, that's the point.
They talked about.
He's a usual ordinary guy.
Huh?
He's an ordinary guy just doing his job, and he gets screwed over, and now he's at the bottom of the rung of the leader of the ladder. And now
he's not interesting, like, because he's doing nothing. He's just getting chastised by his mom the whole time.
But I think that's going to be important for later on. We're going to see how far he climbs up to be a radical. He's going to be an absolute radical person. Watch by episode like 10 or 12, he's going to do some like crazy terroristic, like radical stuff. I mean, we're seeing the beginnings of like a madman happening before our eyes in the Star Wars universe. I'm telling you.
Listen. I hear you, and you're probably right. like all I saw his mother do was just shit on him the whole time. Talked about like his uncle. She's like I reached out to your uncle or something.
Yep.
I know they had a
Yep.
conversation about an uncle.
Yep. Harlow. Uncle
Literally,
Harlow.
I'm thinking like, all right, this isn't moving the story for me. Now it's probably going to pay off later. Like they wouldn't put that there for no reason. They wouldn't talk about this uncle or just show the mom being disrespectful and just showing this guy in the dumps. It's like, what is he going to do? Because I have no interest in his character at all. Like anytime he's on the screen, I really don't pay attention.
See,
Only reason why I paid attention was because I think that same day you made your one editorial video about the cereal and
yeah.
canon or something.
Yeah.
I was like, oh well, so I'm thinking, well, Chris must have saw something in this. Let me make sure I pay attention. And I was like, nah, he's just eating he's eating Captain Crunch. I don't care.
Yeah. That was the video. Ordinary, mundane things of Star Wars, everybody. We got Calf canonized on a live action screen.
Boy out here
But-
eating Captain Crunch and blue milk. I'm like, all right, bro, I eat that all the time too.
Yeah. We got
See,
blue noodles.
You can,
We got
you can
blue
relate
cereal.
to it, Milton.
Seriously, the only reason why I watched that scene, because when I saw it, you popped your video up. I was like, okay, let me at least there might be something here. I was like, nah, he's just getting disrespected, and I'm like, okay, I don't care about you eating cereal, bro. Move on.
But yeah.
I do think though, I mean, you do raise good points there, Milton, with like your criticism of that scene. I feel like that scene is another example of scenes like in this show that are just drug out a little too long. Like, you could have cut down on, you could have kept the scene, but cut down on some of it. Like, because that scene works for me it works for me, but it does feel drug out. Because like when I was watching it, I was like, man, where are we going with this? Like, is there going to be, I don't know, like an Imperial officer busting in, like, just something, or him get a call on his comlink and be like, hey, come back, we need to blah blah blah. And it was just kind of like drug out with his mom. And I just think if they trim some of these scenes down a little, it would help the pacing.
But that's the beauty of the scene, Ben, is that in Star Wars, we haven't gotten just like a regular, ordinary scene between a mother and a son, and her just like crushing him about his like defeat of his job and get it and that's what I love. And we were talking about earlier about the guy Teller saying, hey, it's great to see Star Wars like get chances at doing something new and different and to exceed our expectations or what's the word that The Last Jedi got a lot of people
Rian
are throwing?
Johnson, subvert expectations.
That's the word. Subvert, like you would think, yeah, something's gonna happen here, but it's just this quiet conversation over a bowl of cereal, blue milk, and something about that. Like again, I keep calling back to like The Sopranos. Like I think Tony Soprano and a mother like had the same kind of thing. So I was like, oh, this is like literally Sopranos in space. This is freaking awesome right now, man.
Yeah, see,
I don't know.
I think but that's where you lose viewers. That's where you lose your mom, in my opinion. Like that's where you lose viewers from. Like I get what you're saying completely, Chris. Like on the, the meaning and all of that. But I think that's where you get people going, man, we're 5 episodes into this show. What's going on here? Like,
there's 12 episodes though. We're not working with 6.
So with The Sopranos, look, I like The Sopranos. I like The Wire. I like The West Wing. Even the scenes that are quiet scenes or that are scenes that are pushing along the narrative but in a slow manner, still interesting scenes in this interesting dialogue. I don't remember what was actually said except for like the uncle. Like the dialogue was kind of not doing it for me. Like it's not really keeping me engaged. That's why West Wing and Sopranos and The Wire works, because the dialogue really drives like a slower scene or a scene that's not action packed. Scene didn't push anything. It wasn't driving. In my opinion, it wasn't driving anything.
Okay.
I was not interested. But I don't disagree. Like I think we can get moments like The Sopranos or with The Wire in these type of Star Wars shows. Got to be what's the word I want to use? It got to be provocative. There's nothing provocative about that scene. Nothing saying like, wait, like that. Wow, like they really went there. Like they're really pushing the envelope with that particular dialogue or what they're trying to push here. Not that particular scene. I was like, nah, she's just disrespecting him. That's calling him a loser. Like, okay,
yeah. we're seeing how down he can get before he comes back up. So that I mean, yeah, could it have been more dynamic or kinetic with the dialogue? Sure. It could be to your interpretation as it all is, but no, it's valid. It's valid. What I do want to talk about is the one character, Nemec, who is the younger guy that's in that Aldani squad of the rebels. And this stuff was profound. This stuff he was talking about with creating a freaking manifesto on the Empire and just talking about this philosophy in a freaking Star Wars show. Like, this stuff freaking blew my mind. The fact that they're actually going there, like, that deep into the subtext of what it is, and he goes over this in episode 6 as well, like what it is to be a weapon, what it is to be a mercenary. And it like brought me back to like my college days and like philosophy class and everything. I was like, this is so neat. And then he was talking about the analog technology. And I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there in this country specifically, like, you know, to be so tied in with the grid of the electricity and the Wi-Fi and internet and all that stuff. If that stuff goes down, we're all screwed, right? So the fact that they make Tony Gilroy makes like a I keep forgetting these words about like comparing like fiction to reality right now. Like, okay, like we're getting this allegory on like, hey, like don't be dependent on all this stuff because it could go down or get screwed. So they have that technology. So I really appreciated those little like nuances because we know the rebels, they always deal with like the older technology that's outdated and things. So we get a little bit more as like subtext on like, hey, maybe why it's Nemec that like started this whole thing or something like that. So I really like that conversation. I think Nemec is one of the cooler characters in this show so far because he introduces like new ways of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I when it comes to these particular characters, I mean, I'm liking actually that little group of them. I really do like them. I don't know why. Especially oh my god, the one that put the knife to his neck. What's his name again?
Sheen, I think, or Sheen,
Skeen or Scheme or something.
Skeen, yeah.
That's a perfect name for him because you know, especially after what happened in episode 6. Yeah, the Manifesto kid, I do like him because he was like making you question some stuff, and even in episode 6, he said about, are we just supposed to, you know, like accept what's given to us?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, he makes a good point, and honestly, his manifesto and what he was spouting off, like it kind of does make a lot of sense. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually I was agreeing with him like a little bit about it. So no, I like what they're trying to do with that, and I'm hoping with how episode 6 ended, it comes back into play somewhere.
Oh yeah, Ben, what did you think about this conversation here in episode 5?
Yeah, I mean, like you both said, it you know, it alludes to like real life stuff as well as, you know, in universe. So those type of allegories are always nice in shows, just because, you know, they're nice. You know, they're nice subconscious things that, you know, us, you know, we know. So like it's definitely cool getting that sort of stuff thrown in there into the conversation. And then like his character, you know, like you said, Milton, he's definitely has an interesting path considering the next episode. But but yeah, like his character has been a good one. And then, as you mentioned as well, Milton, another good point on, like, I do like, for my criticisms of like Andor or like the casting stuff being slower, I do like the group chemistry between that group of characters. Like I think the actors are doing a really good job, especially you know, like you said, that Sheen guy, the girl that's in the group, she's done a really good job. It's funny, like
Val Suthra or something.
Yep, it's funny with me and my buddy had a good laugh about it. We're like, man, they're that's the first time in Star Wars they've actually alluded to like sex. When Andor looks at like that girl, it was funny because like the guy was like, oh, she's sharing blankets with another person already, and like that's the first time we've ever had like an allusion like that in Star Wars, which was funny. But you know, that just shows you like this show's being taken more seriously than, or a more of a serious tone than like other projects, which is fine. Like, you know, like it's cool. Like to me, I think honestly, if we could get like somewhere, this is obviously for like another whole other podcast, but if we could get to a show like somewhere between like this and The Mandalorian, like somewhere in between, like a happy medium, I think it would be a great show. Um, but yeah, I think the whole group dynamic between Andor and his crew, I guess, it's a really good group dynamic.
It's working very well because well, we're spending time. First of all, we're spending a lot of time. We're spending as much time with these characters as we would spend with characters in a single movie, right? So we're getting a lot more deeper in these characters. Bad Batch, man, I love the show, but when you introduce characters in a single 20-minute episode and they're gone by the next episode, like you don't really remember them. They don't make an impression. Whereas these guys were stuck with them for a couple episodes, so they do make an impression. And it's not just because they have screen time; it's because we're actually getting deeper into the layers of those characters. One thing I wanted to bring up was the backstory. I love how we're getting basically from each character, like why between episode four, especially between episode 5 and 6, like why they hate the Empire, why they have a vendetta, whether it be Lieutenant Gorn and his lover being killed, or Skeen, and we find out what his cover story was, and then what happened later on after the fact. We find out all these characters. The one guy was an ex-stormtrooper, right? So there's all these people that have vendettas, reasons for being part of the rebellion and being the true believers that they are that early on in. Definitely it helps to like them better.
Right. Because didn't like that one commander, like I thought they alluded to him. They said he fell in love with like one of the locals, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking it
Yep.
was a blonde chick because it's just how they shot the camera over. But I mean, that's cool motivation to want to turn on the Imperials because I mean, dude, they killed. I'm assuming they killed his girl.
Yeah. One last thing I want to talk about before we score this episode and go to the most recent episode is, man, I love how this show is making a TIE fighter such a fearful object. And not just the look of it, but the sound design of that classic screech, and the fact that we hear it before we see it, and how everybody's scrambling to like get the weapons covered and everything, and how it just like comes so close to the ground, like almost brushes into them. It's like terrifying, man. And I bravo, 45 years later or whatever, and we're still getting terror like we've never gotten before ever with a TIE fighter.
No, legit. I mean, the sound. I will say the one thing about this show, and I think I've said this thus far, is the special effects has been on point. Like they're definitely putting in movie budget into the show. I mean, I guess they kind of have to with 12 episodes. That's going to cost more, but the special effects, this looks like it's just a movie broken up in 12 episodes. How it looks. Like it's not cheap looking. It's well lit. Especially with episode when they're doing the Coruscant stuff, I feel like we're watching the movie, the prequels. Like I'm like, that looks just like it.
Yeah.
Even in the and we'll talk about in episode 6 with the whole like scene of like the celebration. I'm like, dude, that looks amazing just for that. So the special effects have been on point. The TIE fighters look great. They sound great. So yeah, I have to say that's probably the most consistent positive thing of this show.
Yeah, I think feels really big with the scenery. That's what Battle in Boston's is doing, talking in the chat. Dark Nerdy Gonzo's chiming in saying Andor has been great. The feel kind of reminds me of how a tabletop RPG mission plays out. Weirdly appropriate with the Imp Troopers that were a callback to West End Games Star Wars RPG of how the Empire is portrayed. Yeah, I love the outfits of the Imperials. They all have like that General Veers look of like the flak jackets with the helmets. That's a really sweet design. I'm hoping for some Star Wars Legion miniatures to come out 3 years from now. With those guys, they take a while on the production line. But yeah, I think going back to the special effects of why they look good, I mean, I think it could be chalked up to they have more time with this show. I think what happens is when you're Book of Boba Fett and you have to like get squeezed into a timeline, they don't have as much time to work on the special effects. There was a really funny line in the She-Hulk show, if any of you guys are still watching it out there, in the finale. They make a fourth wall break, though actually basically half that episode of the finale is a fourth wall breaking point, which is mildly entertaining. But they make a reference to like the Marvel's special effects team. They're like, oh, we can't show She-Hulk changing. we actually have to go on to the next special movie next because that's our budget. So it's just like, okay, we got to go to the next thing. We got to go. So with Andor, I feel like they're not having to catch up because they're not all part of the Mandoverse. So they're not all so tied in. So it's like, oh yeah, Andor will come out when it wants to. Like we know that this next season is probably not coming out until 2024. So they have a lot of time to like really work, like to make this look like a movie, you know? So. Yeah.
The thing is with the whole special effects and like the cinematography and everything visually about the show is, you know, it just wasn't solely shot in the volume like most of Mando and Boba. And I mean, Mando works because Westerns work in the volume, you know, like for the design. But like Boba and Kenobi being as expansive as they were, you know, that's what hurt those shows visually, was because like the volume's limiting. Like we saw it in like the, you know, whatever episode it was when Reva, like the 5th episode, when she captures Kenobi and brings him in and out of that building, like that whole sequence looks so tight, like visually, versus what we're getting here. I think this show was shot over, I think it was in Pinewood, at Pinewood Studios, I believe. Yeah, so, you know, that's a totally different caliber of like, of like the soundstage and everything compared to the volume is. Like, you know, they shoot actual movies there. Like that's where most of the James Bond movies are made. And yeah, like it's just a totally different ballgame. Like I guarantee you if Kenobi or Boba were shot in Pinewood, it would be totally different than what it looks like, you know.
Yeah, the cinematography is really on point. I love when you get to see like the shots of the dam of the bridge and you see like the really wide shots of like behind the back of like Lieutenant Gorn as he's just like walking, doing his rounds. Like it's such a wide angle and it looks so grand because they're shooting literally, like you said, like in Scotland or whatever that was shot. So everything is so authentic and it looks like we're watching a Rogue One prequel. It's sick. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just say like my recap of this episode before we move on. So yeah, this was obviously a table setting episode or a setup episode for the little conclusion of this mini arc, as I call it, for the Al Downey arc. I will say I'm looking at this in hindsight, so it's not exactly fair because I'm probably going to grade it more higher because now I know where it leads. But yeah, but just going off of the things I was talking about, like getting deeper into the characters with stuff like about a manifesto, fantastic cinematography, as I mentioned, getting more about the Mon Mothma and her family, learning more about that, learning more about the tension that's between what's going on with the family there, and just all of that, seeing the tension that's built up with a TIE fighter, seeing the stress that Lucian is going through with just like the whole impact of how this is going to go, the galaxy will be watching. All that, I gotta say, it's a solid 8 out of 10 for me. I'll throw it over to Milton.
Yeah, I mean, so just speaking for episode 5, I mean, honestly, it was very forgettable for me. I'll just keep it real. It wasn't terrible. It's just very forgettable in that sense of like I didn't really pay attention like I thought I would. I mean, there's parts of it where I was like, okay, I was invested. There's parts where I was just not really into it, but I mean, I knew the premise of what they were doing in that episode. Again, it looked visually stunning. There are parts about the show that I really like when this particular episode itself. So, probably give it 6 out of 10.
Okay, 6 out of 10. Got an 8 out of 10. What about you, Ben? What are you gonna finish episode 5, The X Forgets, with?
Yeah, I would say, you know, I can kind of like say a lot of the good parts and bad parts of it, you know, are similar to both you guys. Like I feel like some of the character moments are pretty good in the episode, like we mentioned with some of the conversations Cassian was having, some of the intrigue from Mon Mothma, as well as like the relationship with her and her husband and daughter. Like that's all really interesting to me. But to me, overall, like the episode, due to the pacing issues, due to that too extended of a breakfast scene with that guy and his mom.
Cyril.
Yep, him. Between him and his mom, like that, I feel like drug the episode on a little too much, and I just feel like we're getting a lot of these like hanging on scenes for just a tad too long, like 30 seconds too long. It just feels like it's like, some scenes are getting hung on for a little bit too long. So for me, I would say this was probably the worst episode of the series, because up to this point, I think I gave the first 3 episodes or 4 episodes 7s or 7.5s. So I would have to give this one a 6 as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I do want to acknowledge the one scene we didn't talk about, which was a scene where Skeen has a knife to Andor's throat. I felt the tension there. That was like, whoa, this guy's going here, and then it gets broken up by the TIE Fighter. But I thought that was brilliant because it adds layers that we see pay off in this next episode. So the next episode we're talking about is the most current one that came out on Wednesday. That's episode 6, marking it the halfway point for the series, or the season 1 of the series. That is called The Eye. I'll throw this one off to Ben. I started last time. What was your initial thoughts? Well, Milton started off last time. What was your initial thoughts, Ben, on The Eye?
Yeah, I would say this episode has to be the best episode of the series so far. And that's by a mile, I think. And that's just because I think it feels the most Star Wars to me, personally. It's like my subjective viewing of Star Wars. Like, I just feel like Star Wars should have more action and more like feel of high stakes in it. And this episode definitely did that. So like, to me, I think it was the best episode for that reason, like for the action, for the like the stakes, for all the different characters, like, the mission they were going on and whatnot. Like, you felt the actual stakes for these characters versus like, it being more slow and character based, as we mentioned with our review of the last episode. I think this one was the best one for that reason.
Milton?
Yeah, I have to say this was a good episode. I'll be honest with you. So, there's parts about it where I was like, all right, whatever, it's just slow. But then it was like, it picked up, like, it was well paced for the most part. I think some of the heist stuff had been moved a little bit quickly, like what they were trying to set up. But it made sense. But if they would have just sped it up a little bit just to get to the point. But overall, I like this episode. I thoroughly thought the last 15 minutes was well done. How they executed, the heist, how they showed, that Andor isn't just some like cold-hearted, dick. Cared about that kid that got hurt, and how that the lady wanted to drop him off, but he's like, no, we're gonna find the doctor. And so it showed that Cassian had character. It showed that he actually doesn't just care about himself. So I really appreciated that. I liked how you're starting to see like what the rebellion really is all about and what it will become, because you get to see that not everyone's about just freedom. People are selfish too, and obviously seeing that that scheme guy is like, listen, let's just take this money and leave him, and he's like, no, and he just kills him, just wiped him out. And I'm thinking, wow, like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I mean, you kind of knew it was coming, but you didn't see it coming. And it was like, oh, that's pretty much Cassian. Like, he did it in the first 5 minutes of the movie. So, like, that makes sense. He's just going to just wreck people. Because then, thinking about it, it's an echo of Rogue One, of, like, Cassian killed an innocent man, the greater good of the rebellion. He's like, well, I'm going to kill this guy who, quote unquote, might be innocent or not innocent for the greater good of the rebellion's future, especially when it comes to the financial component of it. They need this money to pay these people that are like fighting against the Empire. Oh yeah, I thought it was a solid episode. I actually was very invested in this episode.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best Star Wars episodes anything ever made. This was a freaking masterpiece. This episode here was far better than I made a video about this for my weekly videos on Andor. It's the best heist in all of Star Wars. The characters, the tension, the feeling, the aftermath. We see it from start to finish in a laser-focused view. I think the best thing I can say about this episode is I felt like I was part of the team. I felt like I was part of that crew that was there infiltrating the space from start to finish. We see such amazing payoff. We've been seeing 2 episodes of these people training, of learning how to march, learning the positions, pointing out before they even got there, okay, this thing's going to be here, this thing's going to be there. we learned about, oh, what is this eye thing? But the cool thing is, like, the whole time they're explaining this, is it's very abstract. Like the last two episodes and even the beginning of the third episode, like, they're explaining it, but you still aren't quite sure like how the plans all fit together. They're all so compartmentalized. You have Vel and you have Cinta that are going to go off and do something else. You're not sure what that is. So even though you have an idea of what might roughly happen, you are still getting surprised moment to moment to moment. And I love the fact that, like, we are so laser focused on this specific area. We're not cutting back to Coruscant. We're not cutting back to Ferrix. This is a very important moment in not only the show's history, but like this moment here is going to be huge, as we see for the end of the episode. This is like the coming out party sort of thing for the Rebel Alliance in a certain way of like, oh, these guys can actually make a name for themselves. They could actually be a thorn in the Empire's side to a certain degree. And, you know, just like Luthen says, I want to put a stick in the Empire's eye or whatever it was like that. And they certainly did here, but I mean, from start to finish, I felt like there was so much tension and so many stakes were raised just from all the development, all the reason why I cared about these characters, and the cinematography, everything about it was just freaking awesome. Yeah, that's as much as I want to say right off the bat, because there's a lot of little components I want to dive in a little bit deeper. Starting with the juxtaposition and the kind of the red herring of the Aldani people. Now, I mentioned, like, we are solely focused, like centered focused on the very well orchestrated thing that's happened. Everything is happening so well. Like, okay, there's like, what's going to be the hitch in this thing? There's got to be something that goes wrong, right? There's got to be something. And they keep cutting back to these Aldani people. And the fact that they're like celebrating, you're like, oh, these are the people. These guys are going to end up like rebelling against the Empire. They're going to screw up the whole plan. So like they do this really great job in this episode of like pointing you to a certain direction of like, oh, here's where this is going to go wrong. But then something completely else happens. And then next thing you know, they're on the run and people are getting shot down left and right. And it's like Rogue One all over again. But yeah, I mean, as far as taking it from here to go somewhere specific, starting off with the Empire, man, like the devious things that they are open to. And what this show does so well is it shines a light on the Empire's effect on the local population of the planets they're on. We had seen this previously in Ferrix, and now we're seeing it. You know, there's like 500, there's hundreds of these guys, and they're leading them all down the trail with freaking bars and taverns. Like, it's like crazy what the Empire's doing. So I want to kind of like kind of go into that point, Ben. And what'd you think about the engineer and the commandant and that conversation of like just the devious things the Empire's up to just kind of get their way in these worlds?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like you mentioned, it's cool getting to see like some of the behind the scenes, like you know, like you said, like the devious like nature, like different things like the Empire is doing, because a lot of the stuff with the Empire, you know, has been I would say like really black and white up to this point, like saying like the original trilogy or Rogue One or comics or books or whatever. You know, I feel like a lot of it's been really black and white, or like, you know, it's always like intergalactic stakes and stuff versus like what they're actually up to, like specifically at this location, you know. So like it's great getting to see like some of the behind the scenes conversations and things like these Imperial officers or Imperial employees, I guess you would say, are having, just because, you know, most of the time it's the high level chatter we're dealing with, like Tarkin or Krennic or whoever. Like, you know, Krennic may come off as like not an underdog, but you know, like he comes off as like a lower level person in Rogue One, but you know, he's much higher than any of these people we're going to see in this series for the most part. So like, you know, there's that. And yeah, I just feel like that adds an interesting dynamic to these Imperials in the series.
Yeah, Milton. So what did you think about the whole idea that the rebels are basically taking hostages, including kids at this point. I was a little bit shocked about that moment there.
I'm not. And only I say that only because, again, we were told that this is a different Star Wars show. It's very much of the formation of the rebellion, how it became what it is. And even when Rogue One came out, people kept saying, "Oh, that's a war film. It's going to be different. It's going to be different." So in war or any start of a rebellion, there's going to be sacrifices made that are probably immoral or questionable. Now, yes, they didn't kill the child or whatever, but at the same time, you can't take. I mean, you can't chance anything. So I understand why they did it. And to me, it made sense because if they had let that kid go, that kid would have screwed up the plan.
Hmm.
He would have gone screaming out some door. And it's not like he's some
Yeah.
random kid from the village. He's that commandant's son. So people know what he looks like. They know who he is. He probably knows who to go to. So I'm not surprised that they held the kid hostage, and I was okay with it.
That's so cool. First of all, let's just focus on the idea that we actually get to see a family of an imperial commandant, like an imperial higher up. Like, again, like
Yeah.
I just love the focus of the small little details in this Star Wars show that has given us like a glimpse at like things that you might see in a comic book, or you're definitely gonna read that in a novel, and that's why like this show almost feels like I'm reading a Star Wars novel with all these like really minor details and characters, but just like they're adding like that whole scene that they had with the commandant and the kid, that's adding like a little bit of like humanity to the empire. Like, oh yeah, like they have families and kids too. Like they're not, they are terrible, but they still have families to a certain degree. So it's something to think about at least.
I mean, because
Oh
he
yeah.
said he's like, hey, listen, like you got to be on your best behavior. This has to go perfect because we're trying to get the hell out of here. They don't want to be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I mean that added aspect to the rebels. It's like you mentioned, Milton. We expected it to a degree just because like they talked about it and what we saw from Rogue One with Cassian, but it was like interesting getting that from like the rebels' point of view because I think we talked about it even leading into this series. Like technically, like if you viewed the Imperials like as running the government and running the world just fine, like you'd view the rebels as basically like an enemy. If you're fine with
Mm-hmm.
the rule of law like the Imperials are having, like the rebels could technically be the bad guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what Andor looks like in the first couple episodes with Cyril Karn trying to crack down. Like this guy, he killed two of my
Yep.
my coworkers. Like, of course I'm gonna try to bring him in. Like this guy's a bad guy. And until we know Rogue One, if we hadn't watched Rogue One right now, we'd be like, we're just following the idea of this guy's a criminal main character, basically at this point.
Yeah.
But also a big element of this episode that really stood out to me, one of the best things Star Wars has done with a planet or anything, is just the planet's phenomenon thing that happens like every decade called the Eye. And we see it start off, and I love how it's just such a character in its own right throughout this episode. Just like everybody's reacting, even when you're underwater and you're seeing Cinta and you're seeing Vel going across, which I love that design of like that little like submersible turbojet thing. You even see like the star like going across, and like that's the cover. Like that's what's gonna be the one fulcrum in this whole operation to get it to go. Is they use that as a way to be like, okay, let's go now because now the Imperials, even though we jammed their communications, they're thinking it's just the atmosphere thing that's screwing it up. They're not going to really think too much of it. So now is a good time. So like all the planning that took to get there, but yeah, just the idea of the eye and about how it intensifies to the point where it becomes like a complete plot point when Andor is like flying through that thing using the analog system of the guy that's being pumped up by a freaking adrenaline needle on his deathbed. Like this is the most raw, crazy Star Wars I've ever seen. This is insane, and the fact that we're getting this on a TV screen, that freaking sequence was incredible. I couldn't believe that I was watching it at home.
It was a good scene. I mean, I think that's where the visuals for me it really kicked in, just because it's like if this was on network TV, we wouldn't have gotten that. It'd have been some trash CGI, but
Mm-hmm.
think with a streaming show like this, and with Star Wars being the property, and with Disney backing it up, like they went above and beyond like that. I thought that scene was really good. It kind of reminded me of the Kessel Run,
Yeah,
Han Solo in Solo.
I got a lot of Solo vibes.
Yeah, it reminded me of that, and I thought they did a really good job. And that particular thing with the eye was very, and that added to Star Wars, because we don't really get to see, like the religion component of it besides the Force. Now, I will say a negativity about this episode was the stupid chant. I could have done without it.
No,
Like the chant,
that thing
I
was.
wasn't feeling it.
And again, this goes back. This goes back to the tension thing of them cutting back and forth to these guys. Like, oh my god,
Yeah, they
burned the goat sacrifice fur thing. Like, these guys are gonna start their own rebellion. So it was like every time they would cut back, I was like, holy crap, they're about to just like gun down the Imperial or try to get the Imperial. So like it like added, at least to me, like I think that purpose was like to add like a little bit of tension more. Like it gets louder and more like there's more vibrant and everything. I'm like, oh.
Right. I didn't see that just because I didn't think that, only because he talks about how they're like we give them what they think they need or what they want or something, and I was like, yeah, like they don't see him as a threat. That's what I took away when he talked about those people, like the people hiking up the hill. He's like, yeah, they started out at like, was it 1,500 or something?
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, here's the thing. So those 60 people that are left are the ones that didn't buy into that crap. So those are the guys that would be the extreme ones, because those are the ones where they're like on pins and needles. That's why they had the armed guys around them, because they're like, at any moment these guys could turn, because they're not buying into our crap, because that's that's their burial land. And then at one point, or their ancestral land with the temple there. And then like at one point, Lieutenant Gorn was like, or somebody asked Lieutenant Gorn, I think, like, what happens if they don't move or something like that, and he's like, that's gonna be the way, they gotta move. So like I think at the same time they were also like, that's why I was like, oh well, these guys can like turn on them at any moment here.
Right, but again, I just didn't see him as a threat. I mean, I never thought that. I was like, okay, like what are they gonna do now? Again, we don't know, but I mean, again, I just felt the whole chant thing. I mean, if they would have cut to it once, okay, we get they're doing their chant, their prayer multiple times. Like, okay, I'm not feeling this. It kind of just it just wasn't necessary in my opinion. But overall, I mean the episode was fire. I mean the execution of the heist was on point. I like how they escaped and how it ended. So yeah, I don't have many complaints except for that one or two things. But yeah, I thought it was a good episode overall.
Yeah, I think that the stuff with the vault was really cool. That's where I got the Solo vibes. It reminded me of like going through Kessel Mines with the coaxium, with the cart that Han was pushing with Chewie there, and it was like the fact that they were so well timed on everything. They were like, okay, we got 14 minutes, we have 10 minutes. Whatever reason, I don't know why I focus so much on time with Andor. Like everything from the guy ringing the bell at like the morning and at night. And then they're talking about precise, like there's a lot of stuff with time. Like I seen in that one video that I did before, it was like, oh yeah, they showed like the Chronos in Star Wars, which is like their watch they call the Chronos in Star Wars. They've showed that a bunch of times. So everything is like orchestrated like a well-oiled machine, and they're all trained to do this, and they get all the Imperials to even work for them, which I thought was kind of funny. Like they have so much power, and they show the detail of like they're patting down all the Imperial workers to make sure they don't have any sidearms on them or anything, and they're like forcing them to get all the freaking credits into their own ship to get out. Like I thought that was freaking ballsy of them, but it was working really well. And then even the commandant has like a freaking heart attack because he's like running around with the sleds, and the guys come out like, holy crap. Yeah, that too, because he's trying to put on the belt. They show that earlier in the episode, and his wife basically just calls him fat at that point.
Yeah. Get in shape, bro. You're an Imperial officer.
Oh man, yeah. I feel like some of the stuff with the Imperials was pretty good in this one. Like the little details, like with characters like that. Just like the belt, just like little implications for characters. But yeah, I can agree with you though, Milton. Like I feel like they cut to the chant a little too much. Like you could have done it one time, because I think, like I gauge a lot of shows or movies on how many times do you look at your phone during it? Like that's a big gauger, like whether you're actually engaged with the show or not. Because if you feel like looking down to check Twitter or check your texts, then the show's probably not engaging you as much as you'd hope. So like me, like some of the moments like that, like with the chant thing, it's like, oh man, I'm taking a quick glance at my phone real quick. Um, but like, but yeah, I think like things like this are, it is interesting, like adding that bit of like religion and culture into Star Wars, just because, as you mentioned, Chris, we've only really seen the Force in Star Wars, so like, what else is out there in terms of like religion or cultures with Star Wars? Like, we haven't really seen too much of that for the most part. I mean, even in like current canon, like I mean, we saw some stuff with, like the Dathomir, like the witches on Dathomir. That would be kind of something cultural. And then like even in like non-canon, like the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, where you have Anakin meet with like that tribe of like aliens. Like other than that, like we really haven't had much of like different cultures in terms of like their beliefs or like religions in Star Wars. So it is kind of cool seeing that added.
It's funny. It's really funny because going back to this week in Star Wars comics, literally the same day this episode came out, issue number 1 of the High Republic came out, and it's all focused on a Jedi named Veldar Mac, I believe his name is, and he's arriving on Jeddah. And Jeddah, 400 years before Rogue One, basically has this thing called the Convocation of the Force. Basically, the Jedi aren't the prime force on Jeddah. There's all these other religions. There's all these other religions, whether it be the Sorcerers of Tund, of the Path of the Open Hand, of the Disciples of the Wills. Like, there's all these other sects that follow the Force, which blew my mind because I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're so used to like the Jedi and the Sith, and the fact that you have these other cultures, kind of like from Star Wars Rebels, or you got the Lasats that practice that. I forget what they call the Force. The Ashla, they called it the Force. The Ashla, going back to their home planet, Lasan. And then you have over there on Dathomir, the Night Sisters of Dathomir. They follow the magic of the Force, which they channel into like green magic. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for Star Wars to grow beyond just the Jedi and just the Sith. And even if these guys aren't even like believers of the Force, it's still cool to see like a different culture that's so diverse from what we've seen, that breaks the mold from before. So before we wrap up for this episode, we definitely got to talk about the end, kind of like epilogue scene, if you will, where it's like we see the Senate chambers for the first time, and in a way that was not as glorious as I think a lot of us would expect, because I don't know if the Senate chamber is always that empty, or as we've seen, some of the people just didn't give a crap because they're like, holy crap, there's been a major attack and we've gotten 80 million credits stolen from our own coffers. People were booking it out of there, not giving a crap about Mon Mothma or speech about the Gormans. So what'd you guys think about that whole sequence?
Thought it was a good scene. I was like, this is what, like I tell y'all, anytime they show anything with Coruscant, I'm paying attention. It's just like, and this is why I told my brother this months ago or a couple weeks ago. I said, listen, we should have got this in the sequel trilogy. We should have gotten more understanding of what's going on with the politics. Like, especially we know for how important the politics was leading into the original trilogy, and how the Empire was looking to dissolve the Galactic Republic's Senate, which eventually we get that in New Hope when Tarkin walks in and says the Empire has successfully dissolved the old remnants of the Republic. The governors are now taken over as regionals or whatever he says. Yeah. So seeing this and how the government is slowly devolving is important, because I mean, there it wasn't packed. Either it wasn't packed or those people didn't care. I love that, and you clearly see like that Mon Mothma kind of feels like disrespected, like no one gives a shit. So I love that. That's why, again, for the sequel trilogy, we should have got something like this in the same manner of at least what are the politics looking like in the universe? How are people actually feeling about a republic coming back or a senate?
Well, it's funny.
Yeah, I love this. I love this scene.
Yeah, it's like in The Force Awakens, we see all we see of the politics is it getting wiped off the face of the
Yeah.
galaxy when
Well,
Osmium Prime gets
Hosnian,
destroyed
yeah,
by Star
Hosnian
Killer
Prime. Like
Base.
you never heard of that planet, and it gets wiped out. We never even
Which
saw it.
it's funny as heck because I don't know if you've picked it up, but there's been like 2 or 3 mentions of Hosnian Prime in this series
Exactly.
alone.
Exactly. And it's like why even throw that planet name? We've never even seen it. Barely. I don't
They
like. I don't. Anytime they mention, I don't care about Hosnian Prime. I really don't.
they're all right. So like I'll get to the scene, but they're throwing in stuff like Hosnian Prime to basically, it's basically to like try to
It's straight.
justify weird choices for the sequel trilogy. Like that's what it is, because like why wouldn't you reference any other system or planet that we've heard of, but you reference that one? It's just it's just to kind of like justify it basically.
They say it.
But like
They say it in a way like Ben. I'm sorry, but they say it in a way where
no,
it's supposed to mean something, and it's like no, because even like that chick, she's like,
who
he
didn't
said something
care?
about. He's like, yeah, something about Hosnian Prime checked in, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking, who cares? Like now, if they said Cato Nimordia or like Hoth or whatever, I mean, just but planets that we've seen or associated with.
Naboo.
Hell, Naboo. I'm like, oh, like if someone would name drop Naboo in this show, I'm like, hey, like Naboo's acting foolish, or I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, take us back there. We need to see what's going on in Naboo. That makes sense.
It was pretty
Cares
cool.
about Hosnian Prime.
They made a
Ben, I'm sorry to interrupt.
reference. They made a reference to Ryloth. I think the first time we see the Imperial Security
Yeah.
Bureau, they're like, "Oh yeah, there's been some roughness happening," and you know that from.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and another thing with Kessel, they also mentioned there was like some roughhousing on Kessel going on, and actually that would be from the Rebels episode, the very first Rebels episode, because we know like this timeline of this show is like running concurrently 5 years before A New Hope. At the same time, Spark of the Rebellion happened when Kanan and Ezra and Hera and Sabine and all them go to Kessel and rescue a bunch of Wookiees.
Yep. Well, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, the references that we like care about are cool like that. It's just when it comes to like Hosnian Prime, it's just honestly, it's just in my opinion, like not to like throw in the whole like, oh, Disney Star Wars is throwing in their material, but that's what it is. Like they're throwing in their created planet, and like it would have been different if we would have started The Force Awakens. I don't know, instead of Jakku, make Hosnian Prime like that system be Rey's home system or something, and then we go, we get it blown up in the second movie, versus, we have no connection. In A New Hope, for example, we 100% have a connection with Alderaan because it means something to Leia. Like Hosnian Prime meant nothing to Ben, meant nothing to Rey, to Poe, no one, and it's just like, all right, well, what do we got going on here? So like, I don't know, like that. When you get references like that, I kind of just roll my eyes because it's like they're just hollow. It's like it's like if you're in a relationship that's gone bad and you're like, oh yeah, I love you still. It's like, oh well, do you? You just don't know what the messaging is, and like to me, it's a lot of hollow messaging when we get references to like Hosnian Prime or some of these places. Like it would have been better instead of continuing to talk about like or like them mentioning Hosnian Prime a couple times. Talk about Jakku. Talk about some of those other locations from the sequel. If you're going to include sequel trilogy locations, talk about them more versus even referencing Hosnian Prime. Like that's
they referenced Jakku, but I was like in my mind, I'm like, what the hell is even happening on Jakku right now? Because the Battle of Jakku hasn't happened, so it's just a dust ball. Like I don't get that. So that was one thing. At least I believe they said Jakku. Maybe I have to watch the subtext. Okay, so I'm like, why do they care about Jakku anymore? But yeah.
I don't know. Like references are nice if they mean something. Like that's the big thing I think what it comes down to. Like because I mean, look, we get like even in Book of Boba, we get references like him. Obviously, him talking about his dad, like Jango, means something to us, but it means something to us because, like, we actually know, like, who Jango Fett is and stuff. Like, we don't know about Hosnian Prime. We really don't know much about Jakku other than Rey being there. But, like, so, like, that's a big thing. I feel like with references some of these like references and planet names are potentially just like, maybe, I mean, I'm sure you guys could picture this, like Tony Gilroy going through the creative process of making this show, blah, 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 and they're needing some fill in the blank planet. Give me that they call up whoever at Star Wars and say, hey, we need 5 planets to throw in these lines. What are some planets we can use? It's that type of deal.
That's a story
and
group.
It's like that's the story group, and that's where it's coming from. It's like but the thing is, like, the story group just isn't like self-aware on this. It's like these references don't mean anything to the audience at all.
And then 2 years from now, we get a Jakku story that's before New Hope, and we're like, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah, finally, it took them. When did Force Awakens come out? It took them 10 years to make Jakku and Haziim Prime something, but we're finally there.
I want to talk about the impact of the ISB and where we can speculate on what's going to happen next, because they call an all-hands meeting, and they're basically like, forget the character that's the head of the ISB. He's apparently a Game of Thrones actor. He plays Qyburn, Maester Qyburn in Game of Thrones, if you're familiar.
Yep.
I knew he looked familiar somehow. But yeah, he basically says, tell your family you're basically not going to be going home until this crisis is dealt with. So things are about to get real over there. Like, I can't wait to see what's happening next. We've seen in the trailers Death Troopers. I don't know if we've seen Stormtroopers, but we've seen riots happening on Ferrix. So I think this is when we really start to see the Empire taken as seriously. Because before, we've seen what's her name, Morrow, whatever her rank is, like, talking, and the commander guy was just like, just brushing it aside. Like, she's like, I have 3 separate accounts. These could be rebels, and he's basically, you did a good job, but I'll worry about it later. Now he's like, oh, wait, now he's actually going to take her serious probably once these events, if they ever do get connected to Andor. So, yeah, I just wanted to make reference to, I thought that was a pretty effective big scene where it's like the entire galaxy knows, even guys that are shopping for some cool artifacts in Luthen's little shop there is like, oh yeah. So you really that's what I loved about this episode so much, is like, as big as those action moments were, you get to actually see like how fast the news has spread around the galaxy. Like, holy crap, this is a big moment.
No, like I said, I'm looking forward to how this second half's going to go. I mean, like I said, it's what I've seen and heard a little bit. It's supposed to get more intense, so I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and seeing Luthen's reaction, like, we've been following this guy since like episode 2, and he's been scheming behind, like, trying to make these deals, and to see he actually had success. The rebels did it. They paid grievely with their losses there, but he knows that Cassian succeeded, and he's just smiling like this is the beginning of a big thing for his people. They've been planning this, and it's been a successful mission.
Oh yeah, I think, like you mentioned, Milton, with it, I think I'm excited to see where the second season goes. Because of like the buzz,
second half,
like the buzz around, or the second half of the season. Excuse me, the second half of the season. Just because like there has been like chatter, like it should be picking up, and just based on like what we've been getting so far, like you mentioned with Luthen, with Cassian, with the Imperials, obviously like the galaxies are like there's more of like a high alert because of all this happening. I feel like there's going to be a lot more stakes added, just of course like in universe, but also out of universe for us, for maybe the characters like we've gotten to know and love, like maybe some of the people from Cassian's crew will be more like at risk or something. So like I think we're going to be getting more of that. We're going to be getting, I mean, who knows, maybe in the next episode, since like this news is spreading, like maybe this is where you get Mon Mothma like realizing, oh man, stuff's like shit's hitting the fan basically, like that type of thing. So I think it's definitely going to start picking up to a degree. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if we go back to like the format the first 6 episodes have been, of like 2 slower story building action, because since we have 6 episodes left, they could do 2 more slower than action, then 2 slower than action for the finale. So it just is going to be interesting to see how they pace out these final 6 episodes.
Yeah, so I was just talking about the ramifications of, the galaxy, the Imperials cracking down.
Yep.
But at the same point, we have these disparate revolutionary groups around the galaxy, and they could also be seeing this as a major event that's going to rally them to inspire them to start thinking about also having movements of their own. And this is going to be a big point, a big turning point for I think the Galaxy, and this leads me to believe. I mean, we've seen previews, plenty of previews with Saul Guerrero. I think probably next episode we might even see Saul Guerrero. I think he might be checking in, and be like, "Hey, Luthen, like I heard all this stuff that's happening. I want in or something." Like I feel like this is where we're gonna start like seeing other revolutionary groups like the Partisans and the other ones that like Andor rambled off in episode 4 to Luthen on the ship there, the Seps, the rebel, all that stuff. And I think if we're looking at like the next half, I think that the last episode 12, could be a big uplifting moment when we see all the rebel groups like combined, and then Mon Mothma standing in front and being like, "We are hereby called the Rebel Alliance," and then that's the whole point, is like all these different groups that have these different missions are all going to come together and form that big group there. And then Andor, now that he has the manifesto, I think we're looking at the one character that basically sacrificed himself to a certain degree for volunteering on this mission. Nemec is going to be the turning point for Cassian to actually buckle down and believe in something rather than being so selfish and being like a drifter across the galaxy. I think it's Nemec's words and his sacrifice that is going to be the one thing that gets Cassian to do. And so Nemec is really like the savior of the galaxy. Because if it wasn't for him, Andor wouldn't have gotten the plans, and Luke wouldn't have gotten to destroy the Death Star, and everything wouldn't have happened. So Nemec is the MVP of the Star Wars galaxy.
Hey, there we go. I do think though, with you brought up a really good point. We haven't even mentioned this entire episode or this entire podcast so far. We haven't seen Saul Guerrero yet, so I think there's a chance with the way this episode has went, like with it like ending on such a high note with all this action, everything. I think there's a chance we get maybe in the next episode a cold open to, like we cut straight to Saul Guerrero. Like we're going to start from his point of view when he's getting this news. I think there's a chance we go with that sort of a fashion, because I mean we saw it in Rogue One. They open with like a cold open to basically we don't know what's going on for the most part, and then I think there's a chance we get it that way, because like I'm still wondering how Saul's going to get introduced in this series. Like it's either going to be, I feel like, us just cold cutting to him like that, or it's going to be somehow Cassian has to like meet up with him, or runs into his group of people.
Oh yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like each series of 3 episodes introducing like a new perspective. We introduced Mon Mothma in episode 4. I think it'd be a good time to introduce Saul in episode 7 to start that. I do hope we see Ferrix again. We got that last episode 5 I'd even talk about. We got to see the Imperials on the ground. They took it over from the Corpos there. They're completely entrenched now. So we're going to see that happening. But yeah, let's just go ahead, score this episode, and we'll wrap it up for tonight. I'll start off by giving my quick analysis. As I said off the bat, this is one of the masterpiece episodes of Star Wars. Everything from tension to character stakes to cinematography to new ideas with Star Wars and atmospheric conditions and well-paced timing on the action, as well as sound design. Like, it hit on all notes, so for that I got to give it a 9.5 out of 10. I'm saving room for a 10 out of 10 episode because I think there could even be a better episode somewhere in this season, but this is pretty much as high rated as it can be for the Andor episodes, and one of the best Star Wars episodes of Disney Plus that I've seen so far, so I'll throw it over to Milton.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought this was one of the better episodes of the series. This is probably my second favorite episode compared to episode 3. Episode 3, I like how that ended very well. Again, it was a tighter episode compared to the other 2. A lot of good character development. love the heist. I love where they're trying to take this story. I'm very hopeful for the second half of the season. I hope the first or the second 6 episodes. I hope the narrative is more mainstreamed in a sense of like, it's very parallel, it's very tight. There's really not wasted time. A sense of like, all right, this is what they're trying to do, and they're trying to get to this point. So overall score for this, probably in 8.25.
Oh, 8.25. All right. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty of the percentiles here. All right, what about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I can echo a lot of similar sentiments both of you had there in your breakdowns of it. Like for me, I thought it was the best episode of the series by far, just because of like the pacing. I felt like was a lot better than many of the other episodes. The third episode is the second best one in my opinion behind this one, but yeah, like this episode had a lot of good moments in it. Like, the heist was pretty good. Of course, the visuals are always on point with this show. Getting some of the stuff with Mon Mothma is interesting, and just like a lot of the stakes that are actually getting introduced for our characters that we're dealing with, I think are nice. Even though, of course, we know like Mon Mothma and Cassian, like we know they have plot armor clearly, but we've been getting nice things in this series, I think, so far. Like even when the one guy had the knife to like Cassian, like that whole even though it was like the prior episode, but I'm just saying like the stakes getting introduced, it's nice that even though the characters are like covered by plot armor, you still feel the stakes. You know what I mean? Like with Mon Mothma, for example, like you feel like she could get busted at any time. Like even though obviously we know her end story, it feels like she could get busted at any time, or Cassian something could happen with him. Like it feels like that, even though they have the plot armor. So it's nice the way Tony Gilroy's making these episodes. And then overall, like I just thought the episode was done, just done really well. Like these episodes are put together well. And yeah, like for that, the funny thing is, so Milton, you saying 8.25, I came into this with my 6th episode being wrote down on my phone as an 8.4, actually. So right around you.
Come on with these percentages.
Yep.
They're just spiting me now with 8.4. Oh man, yeah, I'm looking at the chat. We got Battling Boston's here throwing out a nice little comic reference. Oh, it'd be cool if we could see violence from the comics make an appearance. Byler Valence is such an obscure character. He is basically a character ripped from Legends that worked with Han Solo, that was eventually working to take down some people and eventually tried to kill Darth Vader. Anyway, he's such a comic book character. He's basically was on the Battle of Minban from Han Solo, and basically got like almost killed, and is like I want to say like 70% of his body is cybernetics, including his face. Like his skull is like metal, like Terminator. So yes, I would love to say he would show up, but I just don't think Tony Gilroy would do it. I was actually really expecting him to show up in the book of Boba Fett, and definitely expecting like Dengar and Bosk and all them, but that didn't even happen. So I think it's a far shot. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see that, but I just don't think it's gonna happen. But maybe Book of Boba Fett season 2 if that actually happens.
Yeah, I would definitely say Book of Boba Fett's probably a better place for comic book characters, book characters, heck, even other characters from even the movies or animated shows. Like, honestly, guys, I don't know about you, but even going into this series, like with Tony Gilroy, like a lot of his comments he's made and stuff about Star Wars, I was shocked that, I mean, I guess the only reason, in my opinion, the only reason Saul Guerrero is even in this series is because he was already a live action character that Gilroy dealt with in Rogue One. Like, if it wasn't for that, there's 0% chance he would have included Saul Guerrero in this series.
Yeah. I don't even know if we're gonna see Bail Organa at this point, but I would love to see that. Oh man. Okay, Battling Boss. Okay, only whole and half numbers allowed for ratings.
Well, yeah, well, we'll see.
Got to stick around to next week.
Yeah, I gotta stick around for episode 7. We'll be talking about that in detail, as well as any of the Star Wars news that comes out between now and then. If you're watching, well, you're already probably knowing how to find us on YouTube. YouTube.com/Starrapter is the place to go. 9 o'clock on Friday nights. We are back every single week until April, basically. The only times you can expect the show to go on hiatus is when I'm going to a convention, because that's really the only time I actually ever go anywhere anymore. So go expecting that. So yeah, we will be back for the foreseeable future over the next 6 months, unless something crazy happens. I don't think there's any like major holidays happening, unless like Christmas falls on a Friday. Then
I think it might.
I think it might actually this year.
I think Christmas and Thanksgiving fall on the weekend, those 2 weekends. So
yeah, Thanksgiving's always on a Thursday, so we're good there. At least I'm good there. And then, well, anyway, sometimes we try to pre-record the show ahead of time if we can. But with Comic-Con all weekend, it was just like, I'm not even gonna try. So anyway, we got a 9 out of 10 from Gonzo. Best of Andor yet. I think most people are agreeing, except, I mean, Milton, you have a very worthy runner-up to the episode 3, I think. Yeah, definitely episode 3 is a standout.
yeah,
so,
no, I think episode 3 and 6 have been the best so far.
there you go. So 2 out of the 6 for most people is really good. So yeah, better. It could be better odds than that, but I think we're gonna see the back half intensify even more than it already is. So yeah, what can the people do to find you online, and what are you going to be talking about? I'll start with Milton.
You can find me on Twitter at MiltonWeber7 or on Instagram at Milton7Weber. Yeah, I mean, pretty much what I do on social media is just, sports, funny memes, workout videos on Instagram. Twitter, I tend to just, retweet stuff that's funny because I really don't take social media seriously. Let's just be real here. But yeah, like it's, throughout the weekend, I am ready for the Eagles to play, man. Like we got the Cowboys on Sunday night, 6-0. Holler at you. Jalen Hurts balling out. Our defense is sick. Let's go. But yeah, no, I appreciate you people who are listening to the podcast, watching us. Share this podcast with your friends, your family, whoever that are Star Wars nerds or just want to listen to a good podcast. Like we enjoy anyone that wants to just be a part of the community. So yeah, we appreciate you guys.
Yep, we got another score in from Aaron Daly. Best episode so far. Great way to hit the halfway point this season. Another 9 out of 10. Ben, I'll throw it over to you.
Nice, yeah, definitely. I feel like we're going to be getting a lot of scores like that, and a lot of when we hop on social media this weekend, I bet you a lot of people are saying this is the best episode or in the top 2 or 3. But yeah, for me, you can just find me on Twitter and Instagram at RealBenMaynard. On Twitter, I'm pretty much just complaining about the Browns most of the time right now, or talking about Star Wars or superhero stuff. And then Instagram, you can just find me there as well. I usually post my workout stuff. I didn't this week just because I was kind of not feeling like it. But most of the time, I post my workouts and trying to keep consistent on the process of getting super shredded over the next 6 months, basically.
Yeah, man, you just got to stay driven, have that plan, be consistent with the plan, and it'll all come through. Yep. Oh, by the way, I know, Milton, you're giving a shout out to everybody that watches and listens to the show. So I was sitting, and he's going to enjoy this. I was sitting in the Lucasfilm publishing panel on Sunday morning. The panel wraps up, and I hear somebody say Starrapter behind me, and I'm like, I don't recognize that voice. And I don't know who it was. And they're like, hey, you're on YouTube. I watch you. And I'm like, really? And he's like, the outerrimtransmission podcast. And I'm like, this is a repeat of last year with Aaron Daly calling me out at the panel. So apparently I have a voice that's recognizable and everything without people even seeing the face. And I will shout out the guy's name. I remember talking to him on the live chat, DLE Kamel. DLE Kamel. So yeah, I want to shout you out, man. I don't know if you're not watching live tonight, but if you're watching or listening after the fact, I want to appreciate you from stopping me, and I gave him some pins and some stickers. So yeah, we had a nice conversation for a good 5-10 minutes after the panel got out. So yeah, it's fun little little interactions like that where we can kind of come together as a community and really geek out over this stuff. And one final score we got in from Battle in Boston's a 9.5 out of 10 for me, matching my score. So there you go. We got a lot of the viewers, the listeners here giving 9s, 9.5s. So it's everything from 8.2 to 9.5. So yeah, easily the best rated episode so far, without much doubt. As far as for what I have on the channel, as I mentioned, I have my cosplay video on the channel right now. You can check that out, as well as I will be uploading, by the time you're hearing this on podcasts, it will be out by then, my usual like vlog of just exploring different shots of the parties and booths and everything else going on there at New York Comic Con. So again, I hope to see you guys if you could make it. You're on the East Coast. It'll be October 12th through the 15th, I think, next year. Don't quote me, but it's in a little bit later in October next year. So tickets go on sale sometime in summer. So follow the social channels because those tickets sell out pretty quickly. So anyway, subscribe to the channel, follow the podcast on all your streaming podcast networks. That's going to do it for Ben, for Milton, for me, Chris, aka Starrapter. This was Outer Rim Transmission number 78. Everybody be safe out there. Have a great week. Until next week, that's going to do it for us here. May the Force be with you. End transmission. All right, there we go. A little bit longer of a one. Sorry.